Hey, what's up, everyone? Doing a little impromptu stream here, talking about Joe Biden's corruption with Destiny. So we're going to try left-wing streamer Destiny. This will not be on Twitch because he's banned on there, so... All right. Just give me a second. We're getting the calls set up here. Just waiting for the call. So this won't be on Twitch because Destiny is banned on Twitch. So you're not allowed. Twitch's terms of service is you can't stream with someone who's banned there. So this is going to be YouTube, Rumble, Twitter exclusive here. Oh, I'm on Kick as well. Yeah. Unruly. What's happening? Yeah, someone reached out to me. Destiny reached out and asked if I wanted to chat in this. I said sure. So thank you to whoever it was on Twitter that messaged me. Normally... Alright, Destiny, let's see. I'm trying to get into it. Trying to get into his room here. He'll give me permission. It's like Discord's strange. Some people's Discord server, if they have certain parts of it locked, so...
Took the strong position that React content should not be in anybody's recommended or impressions at all. What would be your argument against that?
People should have the right to be recommended content that they enjoy watching. That it'd be like the very like libertarian-esque capitalist argument that if people want to watch it, they should have the right to watch it.
Weren't you using... Now, I don't know if you were playing devil's advocate or whatever, but yesterday, I believe... This is why I wish I was fucking a part of this conversation. When you were... yesterday, you were having that conversation. It was about, like... I think you at one point countered this point about, like... You used, like, a heroin analogy, right?
Yeah, or the guys... There was a blog post by one of the guys that worked at Adult Swim that was actually really interesting to me that... had to do with basically the justification for why television was superior to online streaming platforms, because forcing viewers to watch content was the best way to get new content greenlit, and that right now it's incredibly difficult to do so. Like if you go back 20 years in time and we had the same media environment, stuff like Adult Swim would never exist because nobody is tuning in to watch stuff like Robot Chicken or Aqua Team Hunger Force or C Lab 2020. Nobody, the shows were just way too fucking weird compared to literally anything else on TV at the time. The only way that those shows were to initially gain a fan base was because there was the anime shit and you like boom, you force these TV shows onto your television and people started watching. It was like, okay, fuck it, it's on, and then people grew to like it that way. So yeah.
So I agree with this intuitively, but just something that comes to mind, though, just as intuitively as a counter, what about all these dog shit weird shows that these streaming services are putting out? You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like these, I don't know of any example, but you know what I'm talking about, where there's like really weird, bizarre, random shows on like Netflix that nobody the fuck asked for.
I don't know. Probably just because they have funding, they want to have original content to draw people to the platform, but none of them are good, yeah. My favorite new phenomenon, I don't know if this is like an official thing, or maybe I'm stereotyping this to 2 or 3 things. It felt like for a while, like Netflix and Amazon Plus or whatever the fuck, like you would make a movie and it would be like the most mid fucking movie in the world, but you would get like Ryan Gosling or like some A-list celebrities to star in like just like a mid action movie. That's like, I don't know what even the point of this was, but I watched like 2 or 3 of these and I'm like, these are the most mid movies in the world, and they were always made by these streaming platforms. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was funny, but yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea about exactly, that process, but again, intuitively what you said, that you read was in an article or whatever, that intuitively makes sense to me. Why that would happen, because I know in my instance there were several TV shows that there's no way I would have watched if it weren't for the fact that I wanted to watch TV and it was coming on, so I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna watch it. For sure. So really wanted to address is how much of this problem do you think, because you were talking about gambling being like a personal, like there was people who made it a personal vendetta much more than it was like people actually giving a fuck about the arguments and the problems that might come to kids or like adults.
I just feel like people just don't understand much about like what gambling is or why it's bad or anything like that.
Sure.
Like when I saw people talking about Slicker, it was funny. Slicker was like, thanked me for understanding him or whatever. But I mean, I worked at the casino, so I hope I understand a little bit. But when people were talking about Slicker's gambling addiction issues, people kept saying things like he was scamming his friends, like knowingly, like just stealing from people like an evil person and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not really how a gambler's mind works at all. Like gambling people, they're not trying to steal from friends. They legitimately think they're going to win the money back. Like they are sick. The gambling fucks with your brain like so much. They're not just thieves like, I'm gonna take this money and never fucking pay back. They really do think, and that's probably evidenced by the fact that Slicker did pay some people back. Like he really did. I mean, I was one of them. I got money back from him. But but seeing like people just
why
like
you're
not
defending them, Steve? You got money back. You were one of the ones. So.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing people not understand like the issues with gambling at all or how the mind works with it, and then people feel like so strongly about it. And I don't know. I just thought it was all cringe.
Okay, so as a parallel to that, do you think that there's people who got way more upset about this React shit because they had a personal vendetta with like XQC?
Yeah, the issue I think is like nobody likes streamers because like I said before, we make like the lowest effort to the highest reward content, and when you juxtapose that with traditional artists, it's like it is like everything that people hate in the world of art, like pop music versus Beethoven, like The Wire versus reality TV, like fucking still frames on DBZ versus like Samurai X, Trusted Betrayal, or Cowboy Bebop, whatever, like original animated stuff. Like everybody, yeah, it's just streaming is just that. So I think people don't like streamers already because we already have arguably kind of the easiest type of work, and then yeah, that's just how it goes. But
yeah, I think that I wanted, especially XQC's perspective on how much, and then yours in contrast, how much of the blowback probably could have been mitigated or otherwise dissolved if, I mean, just low key, if XQC wasn't seen as like, he's seen as like a retard. That's kind of what he's seen as, right?
We'll probably change a bit, I would imagine, but who knows?
Yeah. So I want to know how much, like, for instance, if you got the blowback that XQC did, I want to know, do you think anything would change if he was able to articulate himself outside of talking like that? If he was able to articulate himself and speak English properly, I wonder how much of the blowback would have actually happened. Or people.
It's really hard to call these things in the macro because, like, on one hand, it might be tempting to say, "Oh, you could elucidate your point so much better than XQC," so people would definitely, side with you. But on the other hand, in some ways, I would be way more brutal. I'd say, listen, people don't like streamers because y'all motherfuckers are jealous. Who the fuck cares if our viewers are having fun and we're making a lot of money? That's literally all you care about. If streamers weren't making money off this, you wouldn't give a fuck. It doesn't threaten your IP at all. So, I mean, like, in some ways, maybe I would do better. In other ways, maybe I would do way worse. Who knows? It's impossible to say, right? Yeah.
Yeah. To necessarily point to you specifically, I'm just pointing towards somebody who can, because
you're saying XQC is very hateable, and
yes, XQC is very hateable. Not only that, but he has a reputation as being somebody who's like an easy target to like debate against or whatever, because he sounds like he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, even when sometimes he does know what the fuck he's talking about. So, like somebody who can come off as though they know what they're talking about and stuff like that. I'm just wondering how much of this could have been alleviated by that as an idea, and that's something I guess I wanted to
Yeah, who knows? All right. Well, anything else? I got Mr. Robert in here, so
Oh, no, nothing.
my good
Yep,
friend.
good.
Okay. Well, hey, I love you, buddy. Be careful, okay?
Yep, you have a good one.
Stay safe. What's
What's
up, buddy?
happening?
Just chilling out, Max, relaxing.
I don't know if you're a Fresh Prince. I don't know if I'd go that far.
I am the Fresh Prince. You better have something really relevant to say that is very short and sweet.
Me?
No,
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you asked me to come on, but
I did. Hold on. What do you want? Hello? Quick, Merc.
What? Oh, me?
do you want?
Hey.
That's
Are
not
you-
it.
Are you in the middle of something? I didn't want to
Yep.
interrupt.
I am in
Okay.
the middle of something.
All right. Well, talk to you later. Let me know when you're free.
Okay, love you, bye.
Love you too.
all right. So you wanted to talk about Biden corruption, the impeachment inquiry and stuff?
No, I just want to talk about the Hunter Biden stuff, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
Give me like 2 seconds to set this up so I can burn all my fuel off. I don't need this. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do, Rob. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm gonna do a total brain reset. Okay, I'm gonna zap my brain of all the information I know about this.
Okay.
All right, and then you and we're just gonna take a stroll through the internet, and you're gonna show me the things you've seen, and you're gonna build this argument for me that I don't even know what. I've already zapped my brain. I don't even know what your argument is. We're just gonna see what you have to say about it.
That's amazing. That's an amazing ability to be able
Yeah,
to clear
that's
your
what we're
mind.
gonna do.
Tabula rasa. All right.
Exactly.
So I will start with this. I think that the real corruption that I'm focused on is from institutions such as the FBI. I don't really care. I don't care at all about Hunter Biden. I don't even really care.
Whoa. I care a lot about Hunter Biden.
Well-
I don't even care about the institutional or anything right now.
Just-
I just want to know the Burisma stuff. That's what I am so.
That's what
concerned
we'll
about.
focus on. So the
Okay,
question I have then is, given what we see at the FBI and the intensity that they investigated Donald Trump, including getting unlawful FISA warrants, why was their approach to investigating the Bidens so much different? And I think that it's clear that that's the real story here. But to prove that, I would have to prove, in this case, talking to you, that there's something to particularly this Burisma story. So is that fair as a precursor to start this?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Google Docs. We're just gonna write stuff down.
Okay. So
File new. Okay, hold up. Document. Boom, boom. Okay. Got it
All
set
right.
up.
So I could give you, to start with, a timeline of the events on Burisma. Burisma is this company that's ran by this guy Zlochevsky. It used to be Minister of Ecology in Ukraine. Prior to Poroshenko coming into office in 2014, the president Yanukovych is pretty much universally considered a puppet of Russia. He's no ally to the United States. He gets ousted. We're not going to talk about Victoria Nuland's phone call, potential color revolutions. All of that's irrelevant to this story. But he gets ousted. The guy that comes in, Poroshenko, is basically an ally of the United States. So much so that the United States is basically taking them under their wing in the Obama-Biden administration, financing what would be the equivalent to their FBI. It's called the NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. And so the United States is excited to get this ally that was formerly a Soviet country, formerly a Russian ally, and now it's going to be an ally of the United States. But everyone agrees there's tons of corruption pre-Shokin, pre-Poroshenko, tons of corruption post-Poroshenko in Ukraine. It's considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world, all metrics that show that. So in 2014, this is where the Burisma story really begins. There is
2014. No, I'm
Yes.
right. Okay. 2014. Burisma. Okay, go
the
ahead.
prosecutor at the time, the head prosecutor general, is a guy by the name of Yerima. Right?
Wait. Head prosecutor of what?
Of Ukraine, of the prosecutor general's office. So
Okay,
he is the prosecutor
prosecutor
general. That'd basically be the attorney general of
Okay,
Ukraine.
he's like the AG. Okay,
Correct.
what's this guy's name?
Yerima, I believe say Yarema.
Yarema. Yerima. Okay, go ahead.
And he's basically all of these anti-corruption activists in Ukraine and people around the world think that he's corrupt, just like all the other prosecutors that's been there. He's an ally of the president, Poroshenko, but he's not really taking down any of these corrupt officials, and there's complaints in the United States in Western institutions because of this. One of the cases he's investigating is that of Zlochevsky and Burisma.
Okay, wait. Okay. He's investigating. How do you spell Zlochevsky or whatever?
Zlochevsky, Z-L-O. Wait.
C-L-O.
C-H-E-V-S-K-Y.
Okay, he's investigating Zlochevsky.
Zlochevsky. Yes.
Zlochevsky and Burisma.
At least he's supposed to be. And so what's going on is there's accusations that when Zlochevsky was the Minister of Ecology, that he was corruptly giving his own company all of the best drilling permits. So he basically was stealing the natural resources and the money of the people of Ukraine.
Zlochevsky was giving his company the best mining permits and stuff. Okay.
And I also, if you would like, I'll flag. I talked to our mutual acquaintance Pisco a lot about this case. So if you like, I will flag when he would start to disagree with me. So far, everything I'm telling you, I think everyone.
I don't even know who that guy is. My brain has been wiped of everything.
You're better. So at least you're already ahead. Better for not knowing Pisco. So that's been beneficial today. So so this is agreed upon by pretty much everyone in the West that this was what was occurring. So he had bank accounts all over the world. Zlochevsky. Some of his bank accounts were in the UK, and the UK.
Okay, wait, let me on this guy. Okay, hold on. Zlochevsky. Okay. So this guy, giving his company the best mining permit stuff. He's got bank accounts all over the world. Right. Okay.
So the UK courts start to investigate because they feel that this money has been obtained by corrupt means. And so they put a freeze on the assets of Zlochevsky that are in these UK bank accounts. And what they're freezing it for is they're looking for cooperation from investigators in the Ukraine to provide evidence that Zlochevsky's corrupt. They will not allow him to have access of this money if they find him to be guilty of the crimes that he's alleged.
Okay, gotcha.
What happens is Zlochevsky is tipped off by prosecutors in the Ukrainian PGO under Yerema. Two prosecutors, which they later found out their names. I don't remember their names, but at this point, it's just prosecutors. We don't know who under Yerema. Reach out to Zlochevsky and basically say, hey, we know the UK's freezing these assets, but we're not investigating you for anything. We don't have any evidence of your corruption. Okay. Zlochevsky's team then takes that letter to the UK courts, which basically forces the Ukraine court, the judge, to unfreeze the assets because he's like, I can't keep these frozen if even the prosecutors in Ukraine say there's no crime here.
Okay.
This results in infuriating the West. It infuriates the Obama-Biden State Department, infuriates the UK, the IMF. And
wait, who took these letters to the, to who? Say that word part again?
The prosecutors sent a letter to Zlochevsky, tipping him off about the UK investigation and basically writing a letter to exonerate him that said, we're not investigating.
Who did they write this letter to? Wrote it to the UK?
No, they wrote it to Zlochevsky.
Yeah, but how did he get exonerated?
Because Zlochevsky's lawyers and team then takes that letter to the UK and says, look, the court or the prosecutors in Ukraine. Now, I'm fuzzy on the exact detail, but this is the general story that's told. So I've never seen a copy of this memo. I don't know if that's been made public. But that's the story. So that's where that's when you first hear claims, and you hear this all over the place, when people say the prosecutor's office in Ukraine was basically screwing around and helping cover up this corruption, which resulted in the UK unfreezing these assets. The reason that places like the IMF, the United States, the UK, and other places like that are heavily interested in this is they're sending tons of money to the government of Ukraine, to the prosecutor's office in Ukraine. They're sending, the IMF sending loans, which would be the $1 billion loan guarantee that we'll get to.
When you were talking about Zlochevsky's bank accounts being frozen, you were talking about his bank accounts in Ukraine or in the UK?
So it's difficult to determine exactly when his accounts were frozen in Ukraine, but I'm talking right now about his bank account in the UK. I'm not talking about
gotcha.
Ukraine.
Okay, just making sure. Okay.
Yep. So that's when it starts. So this is Urema. I believe it is December 2014, then, I believe it's Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt goes to the prosecutor's office.
Wait, December 2014, who?
Pyatt, I believe is who this was.
Pyatt. P-R-I-O-T. Who's this guy?
P-Y-A-T-T. He is the ambassador to the Ukraine for the United States.
Ambassador?
Or wait. I could be wrong on this detail. It's either Pyatt or George Kent, who works for the State Department. I'm getting those two names confused. But an official for the United States, I'll say, it's because I don't want to mislead people into saying something. But he goes and talks to the prosecutor's office in Ukraine, and it's basically like, who took a bribe to do this? And Yerema starts laughing. He's like, yeah, we get why you'd say that. And the U.S. official's not bullshitting. He's like, no, seriously, who took a bribe? And that's how serious the United States was. And so you started to see reports from all of these organizations, the UK, the IMF, the United States, saying there is corruption in these courts or in the prosecutor's office, because they basically probably took a bribe to allow these unfreezing of funds in the UK. Now, in mid-2014, simultaneously, so this is mid-2014, Hunter Biden joins the board of directors of Burisma. Okay. At the time he joins the board...
and was this December of 2014 or when?
No. This is like mid, I think, May?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Mid 2014.
Correct.
Hunter Biden, joins Burisma.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And you could hear from the testimony from the interview of Devon Archer and on Tucker, plus then his testimony, that this is how this played out. Devon Archer was in this business relationship with Hunter Biden. And
wait, who's Devon Archer?
Devon Archer is the business partner of Hunter Biden, and they created Rosemont Seneca, I believe is the name of their company. And they were sort of, I forget what the term, like sort of like venture capitalists. Like what they were doing was they raised funds, like angel investor, I believe is the term he used, is what they were.
Okay.
Do you know what angel investing is?
In my industry, angel investing is typically when you get these investors that come in out of nowhere, and they usually provide huge boosts of initial capital equity, sometimes for low amounts of ownership or equity in a company or whatever. But yeah, there are people that come out of nowhere and make big, awesome, amazing initial investments. Yes. Usually risky stuff.
Right. That's better than I could have explained it. So that's what they were doing. They were, he was small time. Devon Archer was doing this small time at first. He's being an angel investor trying to raise capital. Then he would, take fees for his ability to raise capital and invest in certain things. He joins with Hunter Biden, and he says, why not? To get a Biden on your side would be a good thing. By the way, that's not criminal. That's fine. Right. But that was the idea. So he partners with Hunter. He is in Ukraine, and he's going to talk to this guy, Zlochevsky, about being an angel investor in some pitch that he has for some company that he's trying to get investments for. So he gets this offer, and while he's there...
Archer's pitching stuff to Burisma, okay?
Correct, right?
Okay, go ahead.
So while he's there, the way he describes it is, this is when the Crimea attack happens. So he's literally there in 2014 when Russia invades. Right? You follow me so far? So he's kind of like, wow, this is like a crazy coincidence. He sits down with Zlochevsky, and he doesn't know. He's kind of nervous because he's like, well, my whole pitch is basically shit on now because the on-the-ground situation in Ukraine is changing so much. He says Zlochevsky listens to him politely, but he's not interested. He's like, But he offers Hunter Biden an offer. He says, I want you to go to Poland and talk to the president of Poland.
Wait, real quick. Why are they why are they pitching this to Zlochevsky? This guy is the owner of Burisma?
Yes, because
at the time
Zlochevsky's one of these dudes that he does this. So
gotcha.
Rosemont Seneca's job is to, you Destiny have a project, you reach out to them for investors.
I don't need to know.
Gotcha. Okay. So they reach out.
What about Zlochevsky? Because pitch on the ground is bad. Go ahead.
Correct. So Zlochevsky's the kind of dude that would invest in this stuff. He says not interested, but I would be interested in you listening to this offer to join my board of directors here on Burisma. One of the people that's on the board of directors is the president of Poland. I would like you to go talk to him. So Devon Archer is basically like, well, shit, sure. So he flies, I believe, to Poland and talks to the president of Poland. And the president of Poland spins this story to Devon Archer like, we think you would be great in sort of going around and being an angel investor, trying to get investors for Burisma. We think you'd be great for that. So we want you on the board of directors. Devon Archer.
Board of directors of Burisma, right?
Correct. Devon Archer agrees.
The Polish president convinced Archer to join Burisma on the board of directors?
Correct.
Okay.
So Devon Archer agrees, and he comes back and he talks to Hunter Biden, and he wants Hunter Biden to be legal counsel because Hunter Biden has a law degree, right? So at this point, Hunter's not on the board. He's just legal counsel to Devon Archer, who's on the board, right? They then have a meeting. I can't remember where this meeting is, but it's some, like Davos, one of those type of places, like somewhere in Europe. And they have this meeting. And at the meeting, Devon Archer says the people in Burisma approached Hunter Biden and said, how would you like to be on the board of directors?
Okay.
And I believe that's in May of 2014. And Devon Archer said in his interview with Tucker, that was his oh shit moment when he realized, like, this company that's accused of corruption and things of that nature, now the vice president's son's on the board of directors. So that's how Hunter Biden came on. And it is clear that the reason that they wanted Hunter Biden was, as Devon Archer testified, Hunter Biden was the brand. The Bidens were the brand. And we've had testimony from anti-corruption people and others in Ukraine that have said that having a Biden on the board of directors was a signal to all of the prosecutors and everything in Ukraine, don't fuck with us, right? You're reliant on the United States for your survival, basically, with all these grants and stuff that's coming into Ukraine and for protection. So now the vice president's son's on our board. Don't mess with us. That's the signal that was sent. Now, none of that so far, that could entirely be true that happened without the knowledge of Joe Biden. So we haven't got to Joe Biden's specific connection. In other words, I know you're not making this argument in this current discussion, but a lot of people say, what about Jared Kushner and Trump? The difference.
I don't even know. Hold on. Don't even worry about them. Let's just.
Okay, fine.
My brain is being filled with information. Yeah.
Gotcha. Take a little drink here. Okay, so Hunter's on the board in 2014, right? The UK assets thing, then we already explained what happened there. So basically, in February of 2015, Yerema gets the boot. He's considered corrupt. This prosecutor general gets the boot, and in comes a person that was a deputy under him at the PGO, a man by the name of Viktor Shokin, who's been this sort of lifelong friend of President Poroshenko. So he comes in, I believe he comes into power officially February 12th, but it's somewhere in between February 12th and February 15th of 2015 is when he's in office. After he comes into office, there's initially sort of rosy interactions with Shokin. One of the conditions the United States is offering is they want to create this special anti-corruption unit within the PGO. Now, here's where I may differ from people that might say, no, wait a minute, I don't agree with Rob here.
What is the PGO again?
The Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine.
Gotcha. Which is the same thing as our...
Basically, like our Attorney General. Or? Yes, correct. It would be similar to that. Obviously, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but yes, that's basically their head prosecutor office. So what I think's going on is the United States, it's not that they're benevolent. They want a unit in that prosecutor's office that they could direct. We have evidence that they were reaching out to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, this sort of FBI that they helped create and fund, the Obama-Biden State Department. And despite testimony to the counter, we have evidence, for example, from State Department member George Kent, that he was sending emails to him saying, hey, some of these people you're looking into at the Anti-Corruption Action Bureau, anti-corruption agencies or nonprofits in Ukraine, we don't think you should look into them. Now, that's not important for what we're talking about here.
Wait, repeat that last thing again? Sorry.
George Kent at the State Department, he sent a letter at one point to the prosecutor's office in Ukraine asking them to stop investigating this agency called the Anti-Corruption Action Bureau, which was a nonprofit that was partially funded by the Soros Open Society and the Obama-Biden State Department. And basically, George Kent saying, we don't think they're corrupt. We think that it's misleading. We've sent you a lot of aid. This is the wrong direction to be going in. Pisco or someone like that would say, well, that's because these were good people and corrupt prosecutors were going after good people. That might be true, but what I'm telling you is I'm just using that as an example to show that I think what the United States, the reason they want this special unit instead of the prosecutor's office is they want people that they could trust to be at their beck and call. They want a prosecutor if they say, go after this guy, they will. They want a prosecutor if they say, don't go after this guy, they won't. That's my belief. But it doesn't matter. That's one of their big pitches to Shokin. They want this bureau. And what eventually will happen is that bureau is created, but there's accusations that it's being stymied, that basically Shokin's not giving them proper authority, not cooperating with the United States enough, etc., etc. That's sort of the argument that's going to come forth. But as of February, he comes in February. Initially, there's optimism that they'll be able to work with him. The first real event of note is June of 2015 after this, where Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary, sends an email or sends a letter personally to Shokin and says, we're happy with anti-corruption efforts, but more needs to be done. So the reason this is important is, as of June, she seems to be talking glowingly of, in general, anti-corruption efforts, but says more needs to be done. She's certainly not threatening Shokin or calling for his firing. Then we see the next incident of note is in September, Ambassador Pyatt gives a speech in Odessa, and in that speech, he talks about corruption in the Prosecutor General's office. And the big case that he uses to identify that corruption is the Burisma case. He talks about how the UK had to unfreeze these assets because corrupt prosecutors within the PGO tipped off Burisma. Now, as I've already explained to you, this was an event that occurred prior to Shokin's tenure. Now, I think...
Wait, is that true?
And it's absolutely true. The unfreezing...
Wait. Just being crystal clear. Because you made it sound like when Shokin was appointed, that he had been working under the prior AG where this happened.
That is absolutely true. He was working for the Prosecutor General's office.
Okay. So when you say it was prior to his tenure, he was working in that office. He just wasn't there
prior to his tenure as the Prosecutor General, right?
Okay, just making sure.
Right.
That. Okay.
So, and he says at the end of that speech, he looks forward to working with Shokin to fight this corruption. But to be fair, it is clear he is not speaking glowingly of Shokin's office, right? He's not saying you're doing a bang-up job. He's saying there's a lot of problems here. But he doesn't call for the firing of Shokin or anything like that.
Okay.
There are communications we can see that are occurring through this time of Burisma officials emailing Hunter Biden, talking about setting up meetings, and there are meetings that are occurring with people connected to Burisma and Hunter Biden, to U.S. officials and things like that, people at the State Department. We can get into more specifics of that as we get down the timeline here. But the big important issues that we're getting to here now is, in November 2nd, 2015, a guy who's like I forget his official position, but like he's a very high up at Burisma, the undersecretary or something like that. His name's Przarsky. I don't know how to pronounce that. He sends an email to Hunter Biden and Devon Archer. And in this email, he says, listen, they're talking about hiring this firm, Blue Star Strategies, this public relations firm in the United States. And they're saying, we need tangible results. So this guy's emailing Devon and saying, he's like, I hear the points you brought up in the meeting, but we need tangible results. They hired Hunter Biden to get this shit closed. It's not getting closed. So that's what they're saying. We need results. And they're like, we need results in your high-ranking U.S. contacts to sway their opinions on officials in Ukraine. And one of the officials he says is the Prosecutor General, who would be Shokin. And he says at the end of that email, the ultimate goal is the closing down of the investigations into Burisma. Now, it's difficult to find information on this, but at some time, a lot of people say it was under Urema, but I don't know. And I'll explain to you why there's confusion. The assets of Zlochevsky had been frozen in Ukraine, and he had fled the country. He was no longer in Ukraine. He was heavily being investigated. He felt his assets had been frozen. There were cases on the books, case numbers that had been opened. It is clear from this email that they feel there are open, active investigations into Burisma and that they want Hunter Biden to reach out to his high-profile contacts in the United States to help deal with that pressure. That email is November 2nd. Now, I don't want to get the dates wrong on this. I believe it is November 5th. you could find a call out, a summary of a call out that Vice President Biden made with President Poroshenko. This is November 5th, 2015. In that he says, quote, the United States' willingness to provide a $3 billion loan guarantee to Ukraine contingent on continued Ukrainian progress to investigate and prosecute corruption. It mentions Shokin not once. So as of November 5th, 2015, there is nowhere that shows that there was any contingency on the guarantee of this loan to fire Viktor Shokin. Definitely there is continued pressure to cooperate with the United States to out corruption, but nowhere is it being said publicly, fire Viktor Shokin. So this email, again, comes from November 2nd, telling Hunter Biden, we want you to reach out to high-profile contacts with the ultimate goal of getting investigations to us closed down. The first time that any mention of firing Shokin comes up is November 22nd, 2015. A Ukrainian desk officer, and I can send you the link to this. This comes from John Solomon's reporting, and it has a timeline. Ukrainian desk officer for the State Department forwards Vice President Biden's talking points for Ukrainian Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and President Poroshenko. A condition to fire Shokin is now added. So that's November 22nd. So the timeline we see is November 2nd, there is an email sent out to Hunter Biden saying, we want you to deal with high-profile U.S. people, to deal with their opinions of profile people in Ukraine like the Prosecutor General's office, with the ultimate goal of closing these investigations. Then on November 22nd, that's exactly what's being said. On December 3rd, 2015, Eric Sherwin, who's a business partner and associate of Hunter Biden, says the Wall Street Journal got back to us and plans to run an article in the coming days. According to the email time obtained from Biden's laptop, the paper was still attempting to get an answer from Hunter Biden about his potential conflict of interest between his father's anti-corruption message and his role on the board. Right? On December 4th, the following days, the New York Times, following the Journal, submits a request for comment on Hunter Biden's role with Burisma, the corruption investigations in Ukraine and Burisma's lobbying. FTI's consulting TUI responds, no one is lobbying on behalf of Burisma. Blue Star's strategies, however, had been retained by the group. That same day, Pizarski and Zlochevsky request a call with then Vice President Hunter Biden while the Burisma board is meeting in Dubai. Devon Archer testified that he was in a meeting and he heard, it was just the four of them, Devon Archer, Hunter Biden, Zlochevsky, and this Pizarski guy. And Zlochevsky says to Hunter Biden, call your dad to help us deal with pressure from, and I'm quoting now in Devon Archer's testimony, Ukrainian government investigations. So it is evident, despite all of people's claims to the contrary, that Shokin wasn't investigating. That wasn't occurring. There weren't active investigations in Ukraine. It is evidently not true, at least to Zlochevsky, because he is telling Hunter Biden, call your dad. I feel I'm under pressure from, quote, Ukrainian government investigations.
Okay, Zlochevsky. Okay, hold on. Zlochevsky tells Hunter, call dad and get these guys off of me. What was the approximate date of that? I'm guessing this happened
the exact
before?
date was December 4th, 2015.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, in his the defense of this, and I'll be totally honest.
Oh, no, I don't even need.
Okay, all right. We'll get to that later, right? We'll get to that later, right? So, Archer isn't in the room when they make the call. He later's in a limo, and he says Pizarski and Hunter Biden tell him, yeah, I called my dad. So the call happened. To be fair, Devon Archer does not testify that he knows what was said on the phone. He just knows Zlochevsky said, call your dad and deal with Ukrainian government pressure, and then the call was made. 3 or 4 days later, Joe Biden is on a plane on his way on a scheduled meeting to go to Ukraine and talk with Poroshenko. I forget the name of the business or of the assistant to Biden, but I can show you video if you want. In an interview that admits it was Biden himself that came up with the idea of issuing a quid pro quo to fire Shokin. So while it is
Wait, what is the quid pro quo?
The quid pro quo is Biden would tell the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, we will not give you $1 billion. What they wanted was the IMF was going to give $1 billion loan to Ukraine, but only on the condition that the United States guaranteed that loan, backed it with their money. Biden tells Poroshenko, you will not receive that money. We will not back that loan up of $1 billion unless you fire Viktor Shokin. Poroshenko says no, basically. He's like, no, we don't see evidence of corruption. We don't want to do that. Biden, in his Council on Foreign Relations speech, says, I'm not leaving unless you do it. And Poroshenko says, you're not in charge, Obama is. And Biden says, call him. He's going to back me on this. As a result, Shokin isn't fired that day. But what happens in around February, he tenders his resignation under pressure from Poroshenko. And then it's confusing. He kind of waffles back and forth. He resigns, but then he doesn't. And then he's basically ousted in March. During this time in early February, this is what I said about assets being frozen. There's some confusion. At some point, assets of Zlochevsky had been frozen in these Ukrainian investigations. What happened was that one of the higher courts in Ukraine changed the interpretation of the law into when their prosecutors are allowed to freeze assets. And due to this change, the assets were unfrozen. So Shokin's office quickly scrambles and reapplies and gets those assets frozen again. This happens in early February. So again,
whose assets are we talking about?
Zlochevsky's, the head of Burisma.
Oh, okay. So assets are frozen and then unfrozen and then refrozen, or?
Correct. So at some point, whether they were frozen under Shokin or the prior prosecutor Yerema, these assets of Zlochevsky were frozen. So the idea that we were told there was no investigation, it's not true. The investigation may not have been progressing to the point that it was going to find him guilty, but it certainly pisses Zlochevsky off because all of his so many of his assets, cars, his mansion, all of this stuff was frozen. And he was so worried about it that he had fled the country and wasn't there. When the assets get unfrozen, Viktor Shokin and his office themselves step forward to refreeze those assets. Devon Archer, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, specifically goes into details about how Viktor Shokin he was worried about Viktor Shokin, Zlochevsky, freezing these assets. He fled the country, etc. So he specifically named Shokin freezing these assets as a reason. Whether Shokin was the one who originally froze them or not, he kept them frozen up until this court reversed it, and then he fought back and got them frozen again in February. Despite this, he's ousted. The man that comes in for Shokin ends up coming in May. He's a man by the name of Lutsenko. At the time, Biden admits in his Council on Foreign Relations speech, they thought Lutsenko was a good guy. The problem is Lutsenko, the same anti-corruption activist that complained about Shokin, who, keep in mind, the reason that they wanted him ousted, that we're told, is because he wasn't properly investigating anti-corruption measures. The case they talked about the most was the Burisma case, right? He only had, he came in February, and they were calling for his dismissal at the end of November. So in about 10, 11 months is what he had before they said, that's enough, you're fired. Lutsenko will come in.
Okay, do we need any of this?
Yes, I'll be real brief with it. Lutsenko comes in, and within 5 months, he buries the case into Burisma. So much so that Burisma's representatives are writing letters and doing interviews to the Kiev Post, celebrating how it was just a small tax fine they had to pay, there was no criminality, and Zlochevsky comes back to the country and starts doing business again. Hunter Biden remains on the board. And despite all of this, one of the last acts that Biden makes is 3 days after the case against Burisma is officially closed, he gives a speech in Ukraine celebrating their anti-corruption efforts. No one that spoke up about the corruption of the Burisma's case previously in the Obama-Biden State Department ever publicly breathes a word about it again. 3 years Lutsenko's in office, 3 years, and never once is he pressured by the same people in the State Department. Many of them are now holdovers that are working through Trump. They never once pressure him to be fired. Despite 3 years of corruption, the anti-corruption activists being furious, and they knew Lutsenko was corrupt from the get-go because, one, he didn't even...
I don't think... Okay. All right.
Well,
I think we're good.
Okay, so that's the general story.
Okay, let me see if I can summarize our talking points here, okay? Just the big bad wrongs, okay? So it seems like Burisma was up to some bad stuff. The Zlochevsky guy was up to some bad stuff. He was so bad, his accounts got froze, even in the UK, right? And he was being investigated by a prosecutor dude. That prosecutor dude eventually gets thrown out. What was the name of that guy before? Oh, Urema.
Yes.
He gets thrown out because Urema was probably a bad guy, right? Because people in his office were giving notice to the Zlochevsky guy that his accounts are going to get frozen, right?
Right.
After he gets thrown out, the USA starts to get a big hand into the PGO, into the Ukrainian prosecutor people. We've got Archer and Hunter Biden are on the board of this Burisma company.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Did I just shut my shit up? Oh. And then it seems like now we've got Shokin that comes out, and apparently the US and Biden, nobody has anything bad to say about Shokin. But then
initially,
Archer,
within a
and
couple
then
months
Archer and Biden supposedly start complaining that Burisma is being unfairly investigated by this office, and then Shokin now is suddenly enemy number one by Biden, and now Biden starts going to Ukraine and saying, listen, you need to get rid of this guy, and then finally they toss Shokin, ostensibly because he was investigating Burisma, at the behest of Biden and Archer, and then all of the assets and everything by the big bad guy from Burisma, whatever the fuck that guy's name is, Zlochevsky, get unfrozen. He comes back to Ukraine. Hunter goes to Ukraine. Everybody's giving speeches. Everybody's happy because now Burisma has finally been freed from the prosecution under the direction, supposedly, of Joe Biden, correct?
Correct.
And then throughout this, Joe is probably getting some sort of financial kickback or something, right?
Well, it would be irrelevant if he was. There are accusations. So we have several accusations. We have accusations from Tony Bablinski in the email saying the big guy that was getting 10% from that was different. That was the CEFC, the China deal, but that he was getting kickbacks, that shows, from the money that Hunter Biden was getting. We have an email from Hunter Biden saying, I won't be like that. But more importantly, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'll ask you now that I've outlined the case. If the case I've outlined is accurate and Joe Biden got a call from his son saying deal with this pressure, and then he fired this prosecutor, and then the pressure was dealt with, it doesn't really matter if Joe Biden himself got money. That would still be corrupt, correct?
Probably, yeah.
So the
real question would be the question. Here are the big questions that I have. Okay. One is, what was Burisma initially accused of? What was the investigation into them doing? What was the progress of that investigation through their multiple attorney general equivalents? And so like the Burisma timeline.
Okay.
Here are the questions. Wait. Okay. So like the Burisma investigation timeline. So what were the accusations? What were the results? How fast / was it progressing? Those are my questions. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be Joe Biden. Did Hunter explicitly ask him to intervene? Was Joe Biden working as a representative for stated US-EU policy? Those would be my next two questions. And then my final question would be, I think, probably financial kickbacks. Did Joe Biden receive money? Also, did Joe Biden receive? Well, as part of that other Joe Biden thing, did Joe Biden subvert U.S. policy? ? And then did Joe Biden receive money for helping his son? ? I think these would be like the broad questions.
Okay, so let's start with your first one. Go ahead, and I'll try my best. When I can answer, I will. When I don't know, I'll tell you.
Well, here's a question, I guess. Oh, no, wait, hold on. And then also, Shokin. Okay. Was Shokin corrupt? Did the EU/US think he was corrupt? Why? Okay, that would be a big thing around him too.
Okay. So what was your first question?
Let's start with this question for Joe Biden. Did Hunter Biden? What is our proof that Hunter Biden explicitly asked his father to intervene?
We don't have proof in the form of the phone call. What we have is circumstantial evidence that clearly would justify an investigation, which is what my criticism has been. It speaks.
Sure. Can you let's go over that. Can you give me
Sure.
like a news article or a summary?
You could go to the testimony of Devon Archer, who outlines very specifically December 4th, 2000.
Sure. Wait. Okay. Can you link me that testimony? I just want to read stuff.
Sure.
No.
We can see if I can find it here. I don't have this pulled up. In
That's
my
fine.
defense, I didn't know I was streaming tonight, so I just...
You're totally fine. No worries. It's not on the spot. I'm just reading shit. So.
Okay. Come on, what's this damn computer doing? All right.
Pisco has linked a...
Haha, what's up, Pisco? Yeah, he could give you help.
Okay, Devon
Here's-
Archer transcript.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can find the page.
Can you tell me what was said, like a couple words, and I can probably control F and find it?
Yeah, a Ukrainian government investigation was one of the words. So page 34.
I see it.
Okay, and I'll just read. They're talking about being in the Four Seasons. Why did they join you? They ask.
Wait.
Sure.
I want to go back up to 31, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Just so I can get some context. By
Yep.
Mr. Mandolfo. Is that one of the attorneys here?
Yes.
Okay. And I now want to turn your... Let's do... do you want me to be Archer, or do you want to be Mandolfo?
I'll be Mandolfo because Archer seems like someone that you would get along with. He seems
Okay,
kind of like
go
a
for it.
partier. So
Okay,
I'll be,
let's go.
And now I want to turn your attention to Exhibit 4. And this is an email from Vadim Przarsky.
Wait, you mean an email from me, right?
Saying this works. What are you reading?
This is an email from you to Vadim Przarsky, right?
Yes.
Okay, yep, okay. So, saying this works for me.
I'm just going to put everyone else who's on it too. Copying Hunter Biden, Sebastian Montesi, and Joan Pugh.
Uh-huh.
Dated October 5th of 2015 with the subject regarding next BOD meeting. And then starting at the bottom, it appears to be an email from Mr. Przarsky, and it describes a board of directors meeting in the first week of December in Dubai, and that people would fly in on December 3rd, and there would be a board of directors meeting midday of December 4th. And then your response, as you just said, was, this works for me, correct?
Uh-huh, correct.
Do you recall the board of directors meeting in Dubai?
Yes.
Before going to Dubai, do you remember going to Kiev in Ukraine?
I don't remember. Like right on the same trip?
Yes.
Did I?
If you don't remember, you don't remember.
I don't remember.
It's not a trick question.
I don't. On that particular trip in December, I've been to Kiev, but I don't remember it being connected with that trip. It was December? What year?
Of 2015. Mr. Schwartz says, if you don't remember, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I don't remember. I don't remember if we stopped there.
And do you remember going to the board of directors meeting in Dubai?
Yes.
And do you remember who was at that meeting?
Jesus.
Good luck.
Yes. Alan Apter, Alexander Kwasniewski, Milkov Zlochevsky, Vadim P., Hunter Biden, and then some other executives. And then there were 2 Cyprus board members that I can't remember their names.
And who is Alan Apter?
He was a board member. He's a London banker.
Do you remember what was discussed in that board meeting?
Of December 2015?
Yes.
We were in the Burisma Eurasia, was in high gear, and we set up a big office there. That was kind of my content-like piece, as well as Burisma Geothermal had been set up. I just came from a geothermal conference in Reno, I think, right before that. I just remember that because my brother joined. So those are like my content, and the rest of it would have been, reviewing the financials and production and et cetera, et cetera.
Do you recall if Hunter Biden went on this trip?
He did.
And after the board of directors meeting, do you recall at any point going to dinner with any other individuals afterwards?
Yes, we had a board dinner.
Do you commonly have board dinners?
Yes.
And who would attend the board dinners?
Generally, everyone from or some smaller subset. It wasn't limited, but it would be, I don't know, like the particular table or restaurant. I know we stayed at the Burj Khalifa and the sail-looking structure in Dubai, so I think we had dinner there.
And after that dinner, did you and Hunter Biden go out for drinks?
We did not. We did not go out for drinks. I met him at the Four Seasons, the Four Seasons. He stayed at the Four Seasons.
And what happened at the Four Seasons?
We had coffee. I don't know if we had drinks, but we met at the Four Seasons.
Did Hunter Biden during that time ever get a call from Mykola Zlochevsky or Vadim Przarsky?
Vadim and they both joined us at the Four Seasons.
Why did they join you?
It was, basically, after all, that was normal course. Like, after all, we kind of spent the 3 days together.
During that, I'll say after dinner at the Four Seasons, did Mykola Zlochevsky or Vadim ask Hunter Biden to make any phone calls?
Yes, though I was not party to that phone call.
What was the request?
The request was, I think they were getting pressure, and they requested Hunter, help them with some of that pressure.
What pressure?
Government pressure on their, government pressure from Ukrainian government investigations into Mykola, etc. But it wasn't like not a specific request. It was just, we were sitting there at the Four Seasons having, coffee, and there was Mykola, there was one of the managers of the Four Seasons who managed that property, Vadim. So it wasn't like a specific meeting.
When you say pressure from the government, at this time were you aware Viktor Shokin was investigating Burisma?
To the best, I vaguely, whether it was Shokin, there was a lot of pressure initially. There was several pressure issues. It was kind of a theme of Burisma. There was capital tied up in London, 23 million pounds. There was, a US visa denied, and then a Mexico visa denied. And then so Shokin wasn't specifically on my radar as being an individual that was targeting him. But yes, there was constant pressure, and it was like whack-a-mole in regards to the pressures that had to resolve.
And this is Jim Jordan says, the request from Mr. Mykola Zlochevsky and Vadim to Mr. Biden and or if you say it was to you, the request to help from whom to deal with what pressure?
The request, basically the request is like, can DC help? But there were not, I'm not going to, there weren't like specific, can the big guy help? It's always this amorphous, can we get help in DC?
Jordan again, the request was help from the United States government to deal with the pressure they was under from their prosecutor. And that entailed freezing of assets at the London Bank and other things that were going on in Ukraine.
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Big says, I just think you may have just clarified. I want to make sure.
Sure.
When you say DC help, like they said, we could use some DC help. I'm not asking you what you think. I'm asking what you interpreted that to mean.
Well, I'm still learning about it. But it seems like really a lot like at the end of the day lobbying, soft lobbying help, firm lobbying help. There was a constant pressure on them. And there were various service providers hired and people working, helping DC. A lot of power is obviously flexed here. So that was a constant, whether it was putting out fires or helping expand.
So if you think they were asking Mr. Biden for DC help, if they had, I'm assuming what you're saying is they might have had some kind of lobbying group on retainer, perhaps.
Yes.
So why do you think they were asking Hunter Biden for DC help?
Why?
What did you take away from that?
Well, he was a lobbyist and an expert, and obviously he carried, a very powerful name. So I think that's what they were asking for. They also, there was a firm, Blue Star Strategies, that was hired to be, kind of I don't know if they were a lobbying firm or just strategic advisory. I'm still unclear with the differences, but, that was part of the mix. But it was a high pressure environment, and there was constant requests for help.
Back to Mandolfo, he says, what did Hunter Biden do after he was given that request?
Listen, I didn't hear this phone call, but he called his dad.
How do you know that?
Because I think Vadim told me, but again, it's unclear. I just know there was a call that happened there, and I was not privy to it.
How do you know that? I'm sorry, you said it. What did Vadim tell you about the call?
Just that we called DC, but he didn't. Again, it's not like there was not. Oh, we've got all our problems solved, kind of revelation. I was not on that side of the equation and kind of working on the lobbying side of the business.
When Vadim told you this, where were you?
Wait, just real quick. Is Vadim the manager of the Four Seasons? Is that...
No, Vadim he's one of the high-ranking officials at Burisma. So he's a high...
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha, okay.
Przarsky's his last name. That's the guy Przarsky.
Gotcha.
So when Vadim told you this, where were you?
I was, basically then we drove back to the hotel I was staying at.
Who is we?
Me, Vadim, and Mykola.
Was during the drive back that Vadim told you that Hunter Biden had called the VP Biden at that time?
It would have been at some point thereafter, maybe the next day. Again, we spent, on a board trip where you travel with people from all over the world, we spent 3 days together. So the exact time I can't say, but that's what happened.
He told you expressly he called his father or DC?
DC.
We could keep going if you want. How far do you...
Keep going a little bit.
Okay.
The DC Joe Biden thing is different. We can go a couple pages. Go ahead.
When he told you this, did you confront Hunter Biden at any point?
No, I wouldn't have done that. Like, confront him for what reason?
Well, if they being Burisma, are facing government pressure...
Uh-huh.
And Vadim comes, or Mikola comes, and to Hunter Biden and says, we're facing pressure, we need you to do something. And then Hunter Biden calls the vice president of the United States to do something. That could cause some sort of a serious alarm bells for influence peddling, conflicts of interest.
Right.
I mean, Hunter Biden at this point is supposedly acting as the corporate governance.
Right.
But he's calling his father about...
I think that's even more reason that I was left out of these, black box DC types of conversations. I was working on the ground to build the business.
What do you mean by that?
Like, it was not, I wasn't, the pressures the pressures were exerted. That was kind of a blue star, the resources of Rosemont, Seneca Advisors, or whatever the subsidiary and DC partners. That was like that world.
Are you aware that Vadim had told Blue Star that one of the pressures he was facing was related to Shokin and the investigation into Burisma?
So, yes, I was. The narrative that was spun to me, quite frankly, and I remember this because obviously it's the narrative that was spun to me, was that Shokin was under control and that whoever the next person that was brought in was, the fact that this is the narrative spun to me, that Shokin being fired was not good because he was like under control as relates to Mikola. I have no way to verify that, and that was spun to me from various folks in DC, not Hunter specifically, but that was what I was led to believe. Whether it's true or not, I cannot speculate.
With that said, though, are you aware that Vadim specifically told Blue Star Strategies that one of the issues he wanted resolved was resolving Viktor Shokin's investigation into Burisma?
I don't recall Vadim saying that specifically. I don't, but again, I was spun a narrative that was quite the opposite of that.
But not from Hunter Biden or Vadim, correct?
Correct.
And not from Zlochevsky?
No, Zlochevsky spoke very little English.
In addition to this phone call that Hunter made...
Uh-huh.
Have you ever been privy to Hunter Biden calling his father around other potential business investors or foreign nationals who Hunter Biden or you may have been trying to work with?
Yes.
Can you please tell the committee about that?
Again, it's as far as specifics, we can talk about it, but Hunter spoke to his dad every day, right? And so in certain circumstances, when you're in, his dad calls him at dinner and he picks up the phone, then there's a conversation. And the conversation is generally about the weather and, what it's like in Norway or Paris or wherever he may be. But that happened.
Now, we can keep going if you want, but this is going to get away from that specific...
So it seems like did Hunter Biden ask Joe Biden explicitly to intervene on behalf of this government pressure? It feels like, according to Devon Archer, the answer is no. He asked DC to intervene.
It is clear that he knows that calling DC, in his interpretation, was calling Joe Biden. That had been how they had referenced that before.
And we could infer that. Like, maybe I'll grant you that. Now, I'll grant you this for the purpose of this argument, but outside of this conversation, I would never grant that because it doesn't seem like we have any proof of that whatsoever. I want to again reference. Wait. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I just got Omega triggered. Sorry. Okay. According to Devon Archer, the answer is no. He has to see. Okay. Sorry. So, but let's say that I grant that. Let's say that there was some pressure or there was some shit going on. Would Hunter Biden calling Joe Biden and saying like, hey, I think there's some assets frozen or whatever. Like, I don't think this is right. I think something is wrong. Would him calling his dad to dig around into things or look into things to see like what's going on, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Yes, for two reasons. One, because this company, under the eyes of the United States and the Obama-Biden official policy, is that they are corrupt. And they have been complaining about prosecutors going easy on this company in the past, openly and vocally. And other institutions in the West, such as the EU and the UK and the IMF, have been doing the same. So the fact that we know that people in the State Department, like George Kent, were basically shitting bricks that Hunter Biden worked there anyways. They were like, shit, This looks so bad for us. So if Joe Biden is knowingly talking business with his son about this corrupt company, that in its own right is a clear conflict of interest that shouldn't happen. And real quick...
Wait. Okay, hold on. So that argument was wholly unconvincing unless you can show me, like, because it could be the case that Hunter Biden believes that nothing... Here, let's do this. Do you think that it's possible that Hunter believes that Burisma is doing nothing wrong?
No.
Okay, so Hunter knows that Burisma is up to no good right now.
Well, I would say that Hunter at least knows that he's illegally lobbying for Burisma.
Whoa, wait, hold on. We are not even close to that. I'm asking you, is it possible that Hunter Biden believes that Burisma, the company, is doing no wrong?
I suppose it could potentially be possible. It depends on what you mean by no wrong, though.
As in, like, that Burisma might be being investigated or whatever, but the company's not corrupt. They're not doing corrupt, horrible, evil things. That they're not really doing anything wrong. They're doing their best to make sure the company's, like, staying on the up and up.
I would say that is very improbable. He at least knew, as a baseline, he knew this. That the monies that they were sending to him, that he was basically covering, not properly filing taxes on, and not properly filing as a foreign lobbyist. So he knew that they were at least complicit in some sort of crimes, because he
Wait. Would Burisma, the company, know if he is filing with the U.S. State Department about receiving foreign payments?
I'm not sure. I don't know exactly. So I'm
guessing the answer, my guess would be no, not at all.
Well, I
could
think
be wrong, but...
Okay, but fair enough then. Let's say this for the sake of argument. I think it's a very weak argument.
Here's what I'm asking: Is it possible that Joe Biden, Hunter Biden is like, okay, so they're sitting at dinner and they're talking the Burisma stuff, and all the Burisma guys are like, bro, we have so much pressure on us by the government. This is some bullshit. Like, they've got assets frozen in London. They shouldn't even be fucking frozen. Like, there's no reason for this. And Hunter, who's on the board of this company, is like, okay, let me make a call and see what's going on. So Hunter picks up the phone. Let's say he calls Joe Biden, okay? His dad, who would have been vice president at the time, correct?
Yes.
Right? So Hunter calls dad. It's like, hey, dad, what's up? I'm hanging out. I'm in Dubai. We're in the Mia Khalifa suite. Okay, everything's cool. We're chilling. I'm working, for Burisma, okay, and I'm working on behalf of this lobbying group, and we're, calling around. Our assets are frozen like crazy in London. We think it's bullshit. It's not right. Can you, look around and see, what's going on with this? Is there somebody that I can talk to? Is there a process that we can go through? Is it possible that he can make a call like that and there's not actually anything wrong?
I'll answer if you give me 20 seconds to expound.
Go for it.
Theoretically, it could be possible, but it would be irrelevant as to whether or not this would trigger an investigation into Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden was the point person in dealing with this corruption, and his office officially thought that Burisma was corrupt, it would be wholly inappropriate for Biden to be taking these calls. That's why Biden's defense is, we only talked about the weather. Because pretty much everyone would have to admit, if he's taking calls and willing to listen to Hunter Biden plead the case for Burisma, in its own right, that is corrupt.
Okay.
And furthermore, the second reason I was going to say is because we know that almost immediately following this phone call, Biden took official action himself in dealing with prosecutions in Ukraine by forcing the firing of this prosecutor. So the circumstantial evidence shows that there was a call that Zlochevsky said, I want you to call to deal with pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. Hunter Biden made that call. Days later, Joe Biden's on a plane, and according to his assistant, someone on his team, came up with the idea for himself to issue this quid pro quo, which then resulted in the firing of this...
Okay. All right. So on this particular point, did Hunter Biden explicitly ask Joe Biden to intervene? Just to be clear, we have no proof of this. We have Devon Archer's testimony. And I mean direct proof. We have Devon Archer's testimony, and Devon Archer directly contradicts this under oath, correct? Correct. House under oath, Devon Archer says that no, he did not explicitly say he called Joe Biden. He said he called DC, right? But
it's clear that he has interpreted that based on conversations he's had with them before that DC meant calling Joe. That's what he says.
Okay, but it feels like he was explicitly asked if it was Joe Biden.
He says, did they say specifically they called Joe Biden? He said, no, they said they called DC. But he's saying previous to that he knows that means they called Joe Biden. And in his interview...
Wait, hold on, because we read the transcripts.
Sure.
Can you show me exactly where you're inferring that, explicitly or implicitly?
Yes. 1 second. Let me find the page. Page 36. Question.
Okay.
What did Hunter Biden do after he was giving the request? Quote, listen, I didn't hear the phone call, but he called his dad. How do you know that? Because I think Vadim told me, but again, it's unclear. I just know there was a call that would happen and I was not privy to it. What did Vadim tell you about the call? Just that they called DC. We called DC, but he didn't, again, it's not like there was a we've got our problem solved kind of revelation. It was that our side of the equation. When Vadim told you this, where were you? I was basically in the drive back to the hotel. Who's we? Me, Vadim, Mikola. During that drive back, Hunter Biden called the VP. It would have been some point thereafter, maybe the next day. Blah, blah, blah. He expressly told you he called his father or that he called DC. Archer says DC, DC. So it's clear prior to that he knows. When he said... Wait,
why is it clear prior to that? Because when he's asked explicitly, when Mr. Schwartz and everything says explicitly, did he told you explicitly that he called his father or that he called DC? Mr. Archer says DC, DC, and I guess that could mean his dad, but this is what we're using to infer that he called Joe Biden here, correct?
That is correct. And for example, let's say that I was in some sort of business relationship with you. I don't know where you live. Let's just say Dallas, right? And I talk to people a lot and I'd say, call Dallas. And that meant call my boss Destiny, right? If you ask me specifically then, did you say Destiny or did you say call Dallas? And I said call Dallas. That would still be clear to me that I meant call Destiny. The fact that he's saying...
No, I don't need you to... I'm not retarded. I know what you're saying. I don't need you to walk me through it, but I understand. Okay, so this is what we're using to infer that he called Biden with requests for specific help for Shokin.
Right,
okay.
And it is clear, and further evidence says he specifically says it was his dad. He knows that he called his dad. When they said call DC, he knows that's what it was. And it's further evidence by the interview.
Well, hold on, wait. It doesn't seem... Well, because he's saying like he might have called him the next day, which makes it sound like it could have been a separate phone call.
No, that's
a little unclear.
That's not
What?
That's not what he's saying. He said he either told them in the ride back or the next day he was told. But the call happened that night.
Oh, okay. He was referring to the call there.
Right. When they're saying, when were you told this? He said, in the ride back to the hotel. Well, it could have been the next day that I was told. But he's saying the call happened. They're at this after dinner party. And let me just real quick. They're at this after dinner party at the Four Seasons. Zlochevsky says, call DC. We're under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. And then they walk away. And Devon Archer's basically there by himself because he's not privy to these types of lobbying things, right? So he's just there, and then they come back. He gets in a limo with Podarsky and with Hunter, and he's told that this call happened.
Gotcha. Just curious, are there any like subpoenaed phone records around this time to verify any of this? Or
that I don't know. I know that it certainly has not been FBI investigation into Joe Biden, and I don't believe that Hunter Biden has been interviewed. We have people from whistleblowers from the IRS that said that when they tried to connect financially to Joe Biden, they were expressly told they weren't allowed to try to connect to Joe Biden. So I don't know if the House inquiry will subpoena. They should try to attempt to subpoena these calls. I don't know if that's occurred yet or not.
Gotcha. Okay, so then here's a question. With regards to Shokin, you're telling me that I shouldn't be able to find any evidence of the United States wanting Shokin out before this phone call happens, right? Because this would be the first time where Joe Biden is basically alerted to the fact that his son's business is in trouble.
No,
right?
So let me be clear on the timeline of this. There is, in the talking points, the memo that is printed out for Biden on November 22nd, there is a call to suggest the firing of Viktor Shokin.
Wait, hold on. Let's be super clear. This Archer convo, or the testimony, Archer, when they were in Dubai, what is the date on this?
December 4th, 2015.
Okay, hold on. December 4th, 2015, you said?
Correct.
Right? Okay, so you're saying this is not the first time Hunter Biden allegedly would have asked Joe Biden to fire Shokin.
Correct. Right? So
okay,
if we go
so
back
when was this brought up beforehand?
If we go back to the original timeline, November 2nd, 2015, Burisma advisor Przarsky, the same guy we're talking about here, Vadim, he emails Devon Archer and Hunter Biden and says that they want tangible results with the ultimate purpose of closing down any cases pursuits against you, Zlochevsky.
Okay, can you wait? Can you link me that email so we can read it?
I will try to find it. Yes.
Okay.
This is such a shit site. I know. One pet peeve I have in doing the research for this stuff, oftentimes, like, I hate when the media people don't actually cite the document. They just
refer to it.
like, I like to read the official thing myself. So I know I've read the email. Shit. 1 second. That's not the right one. So here's a Breitbart article. It's just the first thing that comes up on Brave. I will send it in. Where do you want it sent? I'll send it directly to our conversation we were having here in Discord. And it quotes directly from the email. I understand if you want to see the direct email. I'm trying to find it as well. But the relevant part I'll read here, and then we'll see that I could confirm if I dig further. If you go down, you'll see when it indents. That's the
How do you refer it during the, just curious, in the testimony part, when Mr. Big says, when you say DC help, like they said, we could use some DC help, I'm not asking what you think I'm asking what you interpreted that to mean. Devon Archer replies, well, I'm still learning about it, but it seems like really a lot like at the end of the day lobbying, soft lobbying help, firm lobbying help. I mean, there was constant pressure on them, and there were various service providers hired and people working on, help in DC. A lot of powers obviously flexed here, so there was a constant, whether it was putting out fires or helping expand. Why would you not assume that that's what DC meant?
Well, because it's clear that that's not what Devon Archer thought. He says,
but that was Archer's response. He says calling DC or DC help means lobbying, soft lobbying, firm lobbying help.
Right. And when he says specifically what happened afterwards, look, he called his dad. I wasn't privy of it. And they say, oh, they said call his dad. No, they said call DC. And he knew that meant. So pressuring DC, if they're right, he knew that was sort of lobbying efforts going. But when they told Hunter Biden specifically call DC, he's interpreting that as call your father.
Okay.
So this email, the part of it that's relevant, which I'll read, and again, I'm trying to find the whole email, but you could see from the article I sent you, it says as following. This is again from this guy, Vadim, and it's Przarsky, and it's to Devon Archer and Hunter Biden. He says, quote, my only concern is focused to be on the same page, re our final goals. With this in mind, I would like to formulate a list of deliverables, including but not limited to a concrete course of actions, meetings, communications resulting in high-ranking U.S. officials in Ukraine, the U.S. ambassador, and in the U.S. publicly or private communication comment expressing their positive opinion and support of Nikola, that's Zlochevsky, Burisma, to the highest level of decision makers here in the Ukraine, i.e. the President of Ukraine, President Chief of Staff, the Prosecutor General, who would be Shokin, etc. The scope of the work should also include organization of a visit of widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine.
Who is it? Who is Nikolai?
Zlochevsky.
Zlochevsky. Nikolai is his
It's weird. His real name's Mikola, but it appears that they also use the name Nikolai. Right? It's just like a translation thing, but that's who he's referring to. Nikolai, Zlochevsky, and Burisma. The scope of the work should also include organization of a visit and widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings and bring positive signal message and support on Nikola's issues in the Ukraine to the Ukraine top officials above, with the ultimate purpose to close down for any cases pursuits against Zlochevsky or Nikola in Ukraine. So what this email is saying is we want you to reach out to high-ranking officials in the United States, in public and private, to get their positive opinion of Burisma to people such as the President of Ukraine and the Prosecutor General, with the ultimate goal of closing down any cases or pursuits against Zlochevsky in Ukraine. Now, the defense has been repeatedly, there were no investigations into Burisma in Ukraine. But it's fundamental.
Wait, I don't care. Hold on. I'm just trying to establish that. I don't need the whole narrative. I'm just trying to establish that.
That's November 2nd. Then days later, We have
Wait, let me just give me like 5 minutes. I'm just
Okay,
kidding. Hold on.
yep,
I'm
no
just reading
problem.
these emails. Motherfucker. Okay, why do we think that something is improper here?
Because
What is the allegation of something improper?
Okay,
Keep
can
in
you-
mind, these are email chains that are CCing all relevant parties with full names and everything being sent on what would appear to just be open email lines, but go ahead.
Okay, because if you allow me to, I swear I'm not going to get too far in the weeds, but if you allow me to fast forward, this is what we know happened. Regardless of why, we know that Joe Biden forced the firing of Viktor Shokin, and that directly led to a positive result for Zlochevsky and Burisma. Because the new guy that came in, Lutsenko, ended up in a few short months closing the investigation into them with a slap on the wrist, which led to their assets being unfrozen and led to Zlochevsky coming back. We know that's the end of the story. We know that the action that Joe Biden did directly benefited
Hold on.
his...
Yeah, but the problem is I don't know if any of that was necessarily wrong, because that's what why I'm trying to get away from the narrative, because I've zapped my brain of all the narratives. I'm just trying to figure out, like, because it seems like on one end there's a chain of events that satisfies this narrative about the horrible, evil Bidens, but it feels like on another end there's just like all of it is just kind of like reasonable stuff. Like he's saying, like, hey, like, we think that these investigations are bullshit. They're done. There hasn't been any progress on them. Can we get these closed down? Like, they're not doing anything. I think, like, even at the beginning of that, email, I noticed that it wasn't in I don't think it was in the. Oh yeah, it wasn't in the Breitbart article, but in the full email, like it says up here, I think.
Go ahead. I'll be interested. I've read it before, but I couldn't find the full email, so go ahead.
Okay, dear colleagues, this is from Vadim. Dear colleagues, hope you're well. Thank you for the docs provided. I've analyzed them most carefully and came up with the following observations. The first thing is that the suggested scope of work is largely lacking concrete, tangible results that we set out to achieve in the first place, mostly focusing on the process. Also, it doesn't offer any names of top U.S. officials here in Ukraine, for instance, the U.S. ambassador, or Ukrainian officials, the president of Ukraine, chief of staff, the prosecutor general, as key targets for improving Nikola's case and his situation in Ukraine. If, however, this is done deliberately to be on the safe and cautious side, I can understand the rationale. And if all parties, in fact, understand the true purpose of the BS engagement, what is BS engagement? Blue Star or something?
Yes.
And all our joint efforts, it's okay and we should proceed immediately. My only concern is for us to be on the same page with respect to our final goals. With this in mind, I would like us to formulate a list of deliverables, including but not limited to a concrete course of action, including meetings and communications resulting in high-ranking U.S. officials in Ukraine and in U.S. publicly or in private communication / comment expressing their positive opinion in support of Nikola Burisma to the highest level decision makers here in Ukraine. Okay, wait, so is this an email to... that lobbying firm?
No, this is an email to Devon Archer and to Hunter Biden. What's going on is...
Who is Eric D. Schwerin?
He is the other business partner, right?
Okay,
And
gotcha.
that name's going to be...
Is this... Yeah, I gotcha. Is this with regards to what they're trying to do with the lobbying firm?
Right. So what's happening is Hunter and them approach them and say, you should hire this lobbying firm in order to further lobby people in the State Department and stuff like that. And they put together a package. And what Vadim here is saying is like, but there's not a lot of tangibles in this package unless you're just being careful to not like put it in paper. But what we really want is tangible results that result in high-ranking U.S. officials either publicly or privately praising Burisma and Zlochevsky with the ultimate goal of shutting down investigations in Ukraine.
Okay.
So
is any of what you just is any of what you just said, is any of that wrong?
What do you mean? Is it wrong? Yes, it would be wrong for the following thing. So first, let me.
Wait, can I? Okay, hold on. You're saying shutting down investigations. I don't see that language here. It sounds to me like what this is
the
talking
last
about.
line, right? It says, with the ultimate goal of shutting down cases, investigation. Isn't that what it says? Let me look again. I believe that's the last line.
And support on Nikola's issue to the Ukrainian top officials above with the ultimate purpose to close down for any cases or pursuits against Nikola in Ukraine. Yeah.
Right.
It sounds like what they're talking about is that it sounds like, so they've hired a PR firm is what it sounds like, right? And it sounds like they want, so scope of work refers to I'm paying you and then here are the deliverables that I want for a particular job, right? And it sounds like the scope of work that they had originally laid out for their contract didn't have any concrete deliverables like we will get XYZ politicians to speak on this issue. So they're having a conversation saying like, listen, if we're going to hire this lobbying firm, we're going to pay the money to like improve our public standing and to get people to talk about it. I want there to be actual like deliverables in like in the scope of work in the SOW, right? And part of this, if we're going to pay these guys, is I want there to be Ukrainian officials, U.S. people to say good things about us to improve our standings because we're fighting this case in Ukraine. It feels to me like if you're paying a lobbying firm to do something, that none of this seems unreasonable.
Well, no, but it would seem unreasonable if someone then in the United States took an action that went directly in line with this, right?
No, wait.
You have to let me explain at some point.
No. I understand. No, I understand. But what you're doing when your explanation is you're baking in a whole bunch of narratives. Because here is a possibility. It could be the case, here's one potential world, okay? You must admit this is true. It could be the case that every single person in this email chain and the company are all acting properly, but Hunter Biden alone is acting improperly. So they might all be doing this, they hire the firm, and Hunter Biden is calling his dad, and he's like, hey, Dad, listen, there's going to be a lobbying firm that comes through. I need you to pull the trigger on this and this and this and this because this Shokin guy is fucking us. But everybody else here could be completely on the up and up, right? Can you admit that or no?
Well, it could be, but I don't understand how that changes the calculation whatsoever.
Because how it changes is because when I read these emails, there's like 7 paths forward, 2 of which are very obvious, and 1 in which is very convoluted and not obvious, and that's the one that you want to gun down, but you're gunning it down on circumstantial evidence that could support like a million other things. Like, when I read this full email, nothing here jumps out to me as being wrong. I would need a whole bunch more. Now, you've given me the context, but I'm just saying, do you agree that if you read these emails on their face, nothing here seems wrong? Looks like he's hiring a lobbying firm to try to convince people in the U.S. and Ukraine that he's like doesn't have bad standing, that he should beat his case in Ukraine. Right?
I think there's a disconnect in the subject of what we're focusing on when we look at this. You're looking at it through the lens of, is it illegal for Burisma to ask a lobby firm to do this? Is it illegal for Blue Star Strategies to work on behalf of their client to do? That's not the subject that I'm looking at. The subject I'm looking at is, what this says is, we want you to reach out to prominent officials in the United States with the goal of having them reach out to officials in the Ukraine, such as the president and the prosecutor general, to shut down cases in Ukraine against us. And then let me finish real quick. And then that's exactly what Joe Biden does.
Sure. The scope of work should also include organization of a visit of a number of widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings with and bring positive signal/message and support on Nikola's issue to the Ukrainian top officials above, with the ultimate purpose to close down for any cases/pursuits against Nikolai in Ukraine. So you're reading this as they are trying to illegally close down an investigation that is going on that is super legitimate. But could this just be like they think they're in the right and they're trying to lobby hard for politicians to like look at their issue and change, their perspective on it?
Okay, but you have to, right? You have to let me expound upon this. Yes. That could be, though I find it unplausible, but it would be irrelevant to the subject of, did Joe Biden act properly? Because let's say that they truly believe that. Let's say that Blue Star Strategies...
And remember, this was what you're about to say. I think this is one of the things that I gave, is that like maybe all of these people who are acting well, but Hunter Biden is making secret phone calls and acting improper, right? That could be a thing.
Well,
right?
no, I don't think... Let me... God, I hate to even get in these weeds, but I don't even think from the perspective of Burisma, they wouldn't think it was wrong. Let's say that we assume you're correct and that Burisma and Blue Star Strategies and hell, even Hunter Biden thinks that all of this is a big misunderstanding. They didn't do anything. Then Burisma could legitimately be saying, seriously, we want you to call your father. We didn't do anything wrong. If I didn't do anything wrong and I was friends with the vice president's son, I'd probably be like, hey, dude, could you call your dad and get this shit dealt with? I didn't do anything. The wrongdoing isn't them. In this case, the wrongdoing would be Joe Biden taking part of that conversation and then potentially agreeing, yeah, I don't think Burisma is doing anything wrong, so we'll get this prosecutor fired. Because it is the official stance of the U.S. State Department, of the Obama-Biden administration, of the Western world, that Burisma and Zlochevsky are corrupt. So if Joe Biden is listening to his son, who earnestly believes, Dad, trust me, they're not corrupt, and Biden says, I agree with you, let's get this prosecutor fired, that is still corruption on the part of Joe Biden. Even
if Joe Biden and the rest of the world legitimately think the prosecutor is corrupt?
Well, if the reason that Joe Biden wants him fired, even if that prosecutor is legitimately corrupt, is because he's listening to his son saying, but trust me, Dad, these cases against Burisma are wrong, that would still be corrupt.
Wait. What if it's not that they're wrong? What if he's saying like, hey, Dad, like you should look into this stuff, or you should ask people to check this out, or this is bullshit. And he's not even really, this is happening through a lobbying firm. Well, actually, wait, here's a question. If it's just Hunter asking his dad, why are they wasting all this money on the lobbying firm?
Because they're going to do it in multiple... I see you're talking to Pisco. Because they're going to do it...
Whoa. Hold on. I haven't read a single thing. I'm ignoring everything Pisco's saying.
Well, it's an argument he made as well.
Okay,
So
yeah, I have no idea what... I haven't even had an In the Weeds debate with Pisco on this. He literally asked earlier today, and I said after I talked to Rob. So I haven't gotten any of Pisco's talking about this. So, yeah, so then my question is, if Hunter Biden is just making phone calls to Biden, why even do any of this lobbying firm bullshit?
Because... two reasons. One, you're going to approach it in many ways as possible. They clearly hired Hunter Biden, even if you don't think that Joe was involved in anything, with the idea that his name would help protect them. They hired them in May of 2014. They're not seeing tangible results. Not only are they not seeing tangible results, that they feel that there's still pressure, that they're still being called corrupt in the West, but they still, according to these emails, think there are cases in Ukraine. And according to what Devon Archer said, Zlochevsky said, there's pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. So it is clear that Hunter Biden alone isn't solving this problem, so you're going to approach it in multiple ways. Secondly...
So Hunter Biden's corruption of having a direct line to his dad wasn't good enough, but it was the lobbying firm that eventually pushed them over?
No, what I'm let me get to the second point. What I'm saying on this point is you would go through as many avenues as possible in order to clear your name. And so that's one. Number two, because they're not even sure that VP Biden could necessarily deliver on his own. They wouldn't be positive. So the number two reason is because you're going to want to sort of have the people that you're lobbying to in the State Department also have plausible deniability, right, when this comes out. You don't want it to just be, we're just talking to Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden makes this decision himself. You're going to want people like George Kent to be talked to, people like Ambassador Pyatt to be talked to, people elsewhere in the Obama-Biden State Department. And you're going to want to be hammering out details of how this is going the whole way through. For example, the pressure from Blue Star Strategies in getting connections to the State Department increased after Shokin was fired. And the reason is because they were trying to get contacts with who the new prosecutor was going to be. And they're reaching out to the State Department going, oh yeah, that business with Shokin, it was kind of strange, whatever. But we assure you we're not corrupt. So it's not just that this lobbying effort is just to get Shokin fired. The lobbying effort is to have a full court press to get cases shut down against Burisma and simultaneously to improve their image. So there's no reason if they had Hunter Biden, they'd say, that's good enough for us. We assume he'll eventually come through.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So
let me, if I could make, can I make a question of you real quick?
Go for it.
Given that you've already said that, like, okay, there is a possible interpretation that you're right, that this could be corrupt, but there's also interpretations that it couldn't. Do you think this at least meets the benchmark for there should have been an investigation?
Honest to God, you're asking me a moral question about like a legal standard. I don't know what the legal threshold needs to be, what has to be met to trigger a legal investigation. I have no idea. I'm not sure.
Well, I think this is clearly, it's something that should have been investigated by the FBI. I mean, there's things we haven't talked about. The FBI also, for example, you could believe this or not, but this was something that was told to them by a trusted confidential human source, that Zlochevsky told this confidential human source that he paid $5 million to Joe Biden himself to fire Shokin. There is more.
Wait. Where is the link to that statement?
It's the FBI 1023.
Wait. Can you link me that? Because that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
You're saying that the head of Burisma paid Hunter Biden $5 million to fire
Joe and Hunter.
Oh, paid Joe and Hunter. Okay.
Yes. Let me see. I don't know how you find these things faster than me.
I mean, chat's usually just linking what I just.
You actually have people that watch you. That helps.
Wow.
Let me see. Here, I'll send you. I think I found it. Bookmark this. Grassley obtains and releases FBI record alleging VP Biden foreign bribery scheme. Grassley today released... Oh, shit. Here it is. I'm sorry. It's linked on there. Oh, shit. Downloading file. Come on, Grassley. There it is.
Okay. Hold up.
I'll send you that actual link from Grassley if you want to. But it's on that page I sent you.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah, now what am I looking for?
Okay, I'll just start reading through it. This is from...
Wait. Tell me what to control F so I can be on the same page as you.
I don't remember specifically what it says, but it'll be something about $5 million. Also, this is a PDF, so I don't know if it's searchable, because it's just like a photo.
It is.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me find this. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm not seeing 5 million. Control F million. Burisma would pay 20 to 30 million. It costs.
I think
5
it's
million.
under this.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I see it. Okay.
Where's
CHS.
it at?
What is CHS? What is CHS?
Confidential human source.
Okay, so AO. Okay, wait. So this is an unmasked individual that we don't know about?
We don't know this person's name, but this is someone that's an informant for the FBI. And we've been told we've been told this is someone that they had trusted in the past. But we don't know the name of the person.
Asked Zlochevsky why Burisma would pay $20 to $30 million to buy a U.S. company for IPO purposes when it would be cheaper to just form a new U.S. entity or purchase a corporate shell that was already listed on an exchange. Zlochevsky responded that Hunter Biden advised Burisma it could raise much more capital if Burisma purchased a larger U.S.-based business that already had a history in the U.S. oil and gas sector. CHS recalled Zlochevsky mentioned some U.S.-based gas business in Texas, the names of which CHS did not recall. CHS advised Zlochevsky it would be problematic to raise capital in the U.S. given Shokin's investigation into Burisma, as nobody in the U.S. would invest in a company that was subject to criminal investigation. CHS suggested it would be best if Burisma simply litigate the matter in Ukraine and pay some attorney $50,000. Zlochevsky said he/Burisma would likely lose the trial because he could not show that Burisma was innocent. Zlochevsky also laughed at CHS's number of $50,000, not because of the small amount, but because the number contained a 5, and said that it cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to pay another. CHS noted that at the time, it was unclear to CHS whether these alleged payments were already made. CHS told Zlochevsky that any such payments to the Bidens would complicate matters, and Burisma should hire some normal U.S. oil and gas advisors because the Bidens have no experience with that business sector. Zlochevsky made some comment that although Hunter Biden was stupid and his dog was smarter, Zlochevsky needed to keep Hunter Biden on the board so everything will be okay. CHS inquired whether Hunter Biden or Joe Biden told Zlochevsky he should retain Hunter Biden. Zlochevsky replied they both did. CHS opinion was making a mistake. He should fire Hunter Biden and deal with the Shokin's investigation directly so that the matter will remain an issue in Ukraine and not turn to some international matters. Zlochevsky responded something to the effect of, don't worry, this thing will go away anyway.
Are you? So I got.
Okay.
Let me read. I'll read the parts that I think are relevant, if you don't mind. CHS inquired whether Biden or Hunter or Joe told Zlochevsky he should retain Biden. Zlochevsky replied they both did. CHS reiterated CHS's opinion that Zlochevsky is making a mistake. He should fire Hunter and deal with Shokin's investigation directly.
Oh yeah, I already read this.
Right.
I got it.
And then at the end he says Zlochevsky responded that he appreciated CHS's advice, but it's too late to change his decision. CHS understood this mean Zlochevsky had already paid the Bidens, presumably to deal with Shokin. But then further down, I'm going to read just a little further. 2016-17 phone call. Shortly after the 2016 election and during President Trump's transition, CHS participated in a conference with Lutsenko and Zlochevsky. CHS inquired whether Zlochevsky was happy with the U.S. election results. Zlochevsky replied he was not happy that Trump won the election. CHS asked Zlochevsky whether he was concerned about Burisma's involvement with the Bidens. Zlochevsky stated he didn't want to pay the Bidens and he was, quote, pushed to pay them. CHS explained that Russian term Zlochevsky used to explain the payments was "получи," translated by the CHS, which literally translates to got it or received it, but it also used in Russian criminal slang for being forced or coerced to pay. Zlochevsky stated Shokin had already been fired and no investigation currently was going on, and that nobody would find out about his financial dealing with the Bidens. This is in 2016 and 17. He was right as well. The investigation was buried into him. So basically what this...
what is it? Wait, I don't need the narrative, okay? So
Okay.
what is this particular form?
This is a 1023. So this is the documents, FD 1023s, that the FBI will take when they're taking reports from their confidential sources. So it's the official report.
And what is the where did this come from?
This was obtained through, I don't know if subpoena is the word. It was requested by Grassley, and it came from the FBI. So it's a CHS reporting document from the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Okay, is there any other person anywhere else on the record that is affirming that any payments were made like this to the Bidens?
Well, I don't know. Not to my knowledge.
Well, I'm saying on the record, so I'm saying like publicly or otherwise, do we have any? Because, yeah, I'm just curious.
Not to my knowledge. Now, let me be clear. Let me steelman the opposite position.
You've already done it like a million times. I know the narrative.
Listen, one of the defenses is, but how do we know Zlochevsky's telling the truth? He's a bullshitter, right?
I don't even know that. Right now, what I have is I've got a confidential informant who apparently said something to the FBI, who's not under oath and is relaying like stories of... Is this his conversation with Zlochevsky, or is he relaying somebody else's conversation with Zlochevsky?
This is his conversation with Zlochevsky.
Okay.
Now, I just want to be... Yeah. So let me be
okay.
clear. Now, look at the difference between this and then what a source told the FBI that resulted in the FBI's FISA warrants in Trump. That was a...
I'm not even looking at...
I understand,
FISA.
but listen, I get that, and I know you're...
Wait, do we know for a fact that the FBI hasn't investigated Hunter Biden? Do we know that?
Well, we have whistleblowers saying from the IRS that they were specifically told when looking into the financial crimes that they couldn't, right? And we know that there's no... Like
wait. People, what do you mean told they couldn't look into crimes? Like they had probable cause, they were getting warrants, and then the DOJ shut them down? Or what do you mean by that?
Shipley and Ziegler, I believe...
Can you link me that? I want to see that.
Okay. Let me see if I can find this.
And just to be clear on this document, so because I've got... I think testimony under oath is my gold standard, and then my second standard is going to be at least like I've got people making claims, but a confidential informant or a CHS is making statements about things that somebody else said about. This is like an anonymous person doing hearsay. So we're at like levels of evidence that are like below the surface of hell right now. But I mean, like, it's not nothing. I'm not going to say it's nothing, but like, I'm getting hearsay from an anonymous source. That's like a unbelievable statement to believe. It's like, oh my gosh, but that's okay. But go ahead.
But listen, we can't look at it in a vacuum. We should look at how the FBI at the time was handling other investigations. They literally unlawfully obtained FISA warrants based on a suspected Russian spy that was a source saying Trump had P tapes and he did illegal stuff, which was bullshit, which was disinformation that they were working with Hillary Clinton's team.
I don't know why. I don't care about any of the... I don't care about
but listen, let me finish.
Okay.
They even continued to get those warrants after they talked to this source, and the source basically told them, oh, that was just all bullshit. I can't believe you're using it. So their standard with that source that they interviewed was they were never able to verify the claims, and even when they talked to the person and he basically retracted it, they still used it. So to then say this actual confidential human source that we're being told as a CHS is someone the FBI has used and trusted before, that is giving them information to not then open an investigation as they did with the Donald Trump stuff, seems to be a clear disparity.
Okay, that might be true, but I don't care.
I think you're downplaying sort of what a CHS is. A CHS isn't just like someone randomly that called in and phoned a tip. A CHS is someone that is on the books for the FBI that most of the time they're paying, that you can't even out them in Freedom of Information Act requests because they're considered instrumental to the FBI's intelligence operations. So
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is I have a confidential human source that's reporting something that somebody else said, and I can't put that. I can't. There's no cross-examination of that statement. The guy's not even under oath. I don't know anything about what he's saying. Right? Because the Burisma guy could literally just be like talking shit. I have no idea. Right?
I mean,
like what is
that's
Zlochevsky
true.
Said what has Zlochevsky said publicly about this?
Zlochevsky publicly said, "I didn't pay the Bidens." Why wouldn't he say that?
And then
What's he going to do? Admit it?
Well, and then is there any record? Is there any corroboration? Is there anything under oath? Is there anything investigatory? Is there anything non-circumstantial that shows that he did pay the Bidens?
Well, what we have is a bunch of shell companies that are set up that, again, IRS whistleblowers were attempting to investigate, and they were basically told that they couldn't talk to certain family members of Hunter Biden, including Joe Biden.
Okay, hold on, wait. What you just said there, that makes sense to me. IRS people probably can't do rogue investigations. That makes sense, right?
Who would you expect to be doing the financial investigations of money trails?
I don't know the full structure of this, but my guess would be this would be an investigation that would probably start at like the DOJ or like the FBI or somebody would be investigating this. It wouldn't be just the IRS.
Well,
is this
the
a tax
IRS
issue right now, or
the IRS? What? So two things. One, then you would admit had the FBI not done this, that would be negligent on their part, correct?
I don't know if the FBI has done this. I don't even know the answer to that.
Okay, let's say that's fine, right? But if we do find out the answer that up till this point they hadn't, you would admit that would be negligent.
I don't have access to the collection of intelligence that the FBI has. Like, Bush saw convincing documents from intelligence that show that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, but it was unvetted intelligence. I don't know what intelligence the FBI is holding on to that might show them one way or another that he does or does. It could be the fact that this plus other stuff means they absolutely should investigate. They could have reason to believe why this is bullshit. For all I know, the FBI might have CHS people reporting that Zlochevsky says that he's got a 15-inch dick. I don't know. That might be the case, and nothing is believed that he says to certain people. I don't know. I just don't know. I'm being honest.
Well, I guess if they had that, then they should get their tape measure out and check. The point is that it's quite obvious, right, that this is something that is an accusation more than the accusations that connected Trump and Trump-Russia collusion.
Why are we talking about Trump?
Because
remember, I mind-wiped myself. I'm just looking here to see. And listen, at the end of this whole talk, it could be the fact that you could go, listen, Stephen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have any good evidence of Biden doing anything, but I think there should be an investigation. And if that's your position, that's fine. But I feel like when we talk about this, it feels like your position is basically Hunter and Joe, it's a foregone conclusion that there was corruption. We just need to formalize it with a conviction now. Well, but it sounds like now as I dig into this, I'm just asking, my mind is wiped and I don't know, and I'm not trying to draw anything external, but it sounds like what we're saying now is, okay, there's no direct evidence of anything. There's a lot of circumstantial stuff, and we've got some hearsay from an anonymous source that is directly contradicted under oath testimony. But I think there should be an investigation maybe on that. That's a way different. The strength of that claim is way different. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I got two things to say. Where was this CHS claim directly contradicted?
Well, the idea that Devon Archer seemed to explicitly say that there wasn't like a request for a call to Joe Biden, that calling DC was working with firms and stuff. And it seems we got an email to a lobbying firm about this. And that it doesn't seem like there's any evidence. I haven't seen any evidence like under oath or anything that there is a direct link or payment or anything to the Bidens.
But that's a different claim, right? Like, I disagree with your interpretation. We've already talked about the call DC thing, but even if I would grant your interpretation, that's not dispositive of this confidential human source. Devon Archer basically admits, he's like, they didn't keep me in the loop with that kind of shit. So what you said that there was direct under oath testimony that contradicts that, that's not true. Devon Archer saying I'm not aware of a payment wouldn't mean.
Or sorry, not the payment. The direct was. I feel like it contradicts your claim that there was an explicit call to Joe Biden made for help. It seemed pretty clear that they were explicitly calling DC for, like, to talk to lobbying firms in DC.
I disagree. It is clear that Devon Archer thought that he met Joe Biden. And again, that's separate from this confidential human source. So nothing this CHS. And what I'm saying, if I could go back, if you remember to the beginning of this, and pretty much in any conversation I've had with you or anyone else about this, unlike many people that are like, lock her up or lock Trump up or lock Biden up, that's not my concern. My concern is there a two-tier system at places like the FBI? Are they approaching people that they don't like harsher and protecting people that they do like? And so when I'm saying,
but I'm not here. I don't care about the FBI.
So
I care about Hunter Biden right now.
15 seconds more on this, and I promise I'll move. So when I'm talking about, look how they treated confidential sources when it came to trusting them to get FISA warrants to spy on Biden, and then when we have CHSs saying this stuff that is direct connections, unlike the disinformation they were looking at when it came to investigating Trump, all of a sudden it's, well, they couldn't be bothered. It's no big deal. I think it's ridiculous, right? And it's certainly worth an impeachment inquiry. Now, to answer your question about the money, the IRS is certainly, even if the FBI was looking as well, there is no reason that the IRS should have been told by DOJ or anyone else that they couldn't reach out and look for these crimes. Even if the FBI is looking for crimes connecting, theoretically, they have this invisible investigation into Joe Biden that we're not aware of, right? There's no reason that.
Well, hold on, wait, hold on. Two things. One, I'm pretty sure Republicans lost their fucking shit when the IRS was conducting what they believe were politically motivated investigations under Obama. So I don't know why we would think it would be the IRS's job to investigate this, number one. And number two, when you say invisible investigations, aren't all federal investigations invisible except for in extraordinary matters? Maybe. The FBI doesn't usually publicly comment on investigations, right? So that's ordinary behavior, right?
Well, it depends. Maybe
no, it doesn't. The ordinary behavior does not depend. Or there might be an extraordinary circumstance. So, for instance, Comey announcing Clinton's investigation, but ordinarily the FBI won't comment or state that there's an ongoing investigation, right?
How did we know there was an investigation in Crossfire Hurricane then?
I don't know. How do we figure that out? What happened?
And the FBI admitted it. We knew that investigation.
Why did the FBI make that admission?
I don't know. I guess
CNN. Let's look it up.
I think the first reporting of it was a Mother Jones article briefly before the election that came from Harry Reid. But then I believe the official reporting.
Wait, what was the name of this? I'm sorry.
I believe it was a Mother Jones article.
No. What was the name of this Operation FBI thing? What was it called?
Crossfire Hurricane.
Crossfire Hurricane. Okay. Oh, wait. Are you telling me right now? So then it was a leak. It wasn't the FBI making an announcement, was it?
Well, but the leak came from Harry Reid, so Congress people would have been aware. And there's no Congress person that said, yeah, there's an investigation into Joe Biden. There's not. You know it, and I know it. They haven't investigated Joe Biden. They haven't.
Well, wait. I don't know why you don't like to when you don't like to address like a certain point and you just want to jump ahead and tell a story. It makes me feel like you're knowingly lying. Like you're not just incorrect or disagreeing. It makes me feel, okay. So right now, the very clear question that's before us is it ordinary for the FBI to announce investigations? My claim was no. It's not ordinary. They don't ordinarily do that. And you go, well, it just kind of depends whenever. And then you brought up this Operation Crossfire Hurricane. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, did the FBI just publicly announce this, or did they do it for a really good reason, or was it a leak? Because those are three very different things. So
I don't know. I think the first we heard of it may have been from a leak. There was a public announcing of Crossfire Hurricane. There have been high-profile cases where there have been public announcings that there were investigations. And I will say this, I am 99% certain that there has not been an investigation anywhere commiserate to what there should have been, such as interviewing Joe Biden, investigating Joe Biden's bank records and things like that. If I'm incorrect about that and the FBI is able to show proof that they did meticulously have some sort of investigation into the bank accounts of Joe Biden, and that's why they were telling people in the IRS not to do it, I'll eat crow on that. I'm wondering if they didn't do that, though, if we find out that didn't occur, will you admit that was negligent?
That what was negligent? That
if they hadn't been looking into the bank records.
I don't know. I don't know what information they have in front of them.
So let's go with what we do.
Wait, hold on. Yeah. I'm sorry, because I'm just reading the script for Hurricane thing you brought up. So all of this was subsumed by the Mueller investigation, correct?
You mean they took it over? Is what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't seem like the FBI just announced this. So that wasn't. So this is another standard operating procedure for the FBI. Is they don't announce these investigations. Also, I just see in here. I'm just reading. There's just the Wikipedia. You made it sound like all of the FISA warrants on Trump were bullshit. This is saying 2 of the 4 FISA warrants were declared invalid.
The Durham report says that the entire process was unlawful.
Why didn't it recommend any charges if the law was being broken?
Unlawful is different than criminal. It means they went outside the scope. So, for example, if the FBI spies on you and they weren't supposed to, who do you arrest?
If the FBI spies on you and they weren't supposed to, isn't that illegal?
Yeah, but who do you arrest?
Probably the person that authorized the wiretaps?
You probably sue them, but no one goes to jail.
Is it? Hold on. Wouldn't it be a violation of one party, two parties' consents? Aren't you breaking state laws here, if not federal laws?
I don't know. I know this.
Hold on, wait. That's a pretty important claim, isn't it? If somebody is illegally wiretapping your phone, my understanding is at the very least, I believe that's a class 3 felony in a lot of states, is it not?
Okay. Then let me tell you why I think. Let me tell you why I think. Let me tell you why I think your argument's irrelevant, right? Didn't you admit that the Wikipedia article says 2 were wrong?
Correct. Yeah.
And why weren't charges brought?
Well, my understanding is there was one person that was charged and convicted for falsifying a statement.
Correct.
Yep.
But that's not the only reason that they were deemed unlawful.
Sure, but Durham, after the Durham report, it's not like Durham said that the FBI, my understanding was, and this is another article, and this is a while ago for the Durham report, my understanding was the conclusion of the Durham report was that it seemed like during politically charged investigations, people got a little bit eager, and that probably wasn't good. But he didn't say that like the FBI as a whole fucked up, or we need to change processes, or anything illegal or super bad happened. That seemed to be my general takeaway from the Durham report. Am I right or wrong about that?
You're wrong, right? Durham actually concludes at one point he's not even recommending incremental changes because unless the culture at the FBI changes, recommending incremental policy changes would be irrelevant. The IG report prior to the Durham report also recommended many changes to the FISA process because...
Wait, hold on. Wait. Why did we jump to that? Let's just focus on the Durham thing. One thing at a time. So if I look up like Durham report, he's going to say, at the end, he's going to say, I don't recommend any change because it'd be a waste of time because they're so compromised. Is that what you're saying he would say? I
think he said that, yes, that he wasn't doing specific changes because the culture was such at the FBI that it needed to change.
Hold on. I'm looking at, it's a 316-page thing. Just real quick. Okay. I scroll down right to the bottom. I get possible FBI reform. One possible way to provide additional scrutiny of politically sensitive investigations would be to identify in advance an official who is responsible for challenging the steps taken in the investigation. Stuart Baker proposes having a career position for a nonpartisan FBI agent or lawyer to challenge the FISA application in every other stage of the investigation. This would be done in investigations that pose partisan risk. In Baker's view, the Attorney General, through the Supplemental Reforms Memorandum, has already taken a good step in this direction by requiring that politically sensitive surveillance and search applications be reviewed by a special agent from a field office not involved in the investigation. Similarly, Adam Klein said that the DOJ and FBI leaders should consider whether a regularized practice of internal red teaming in the most sensitive cases, whether within the FBI or in collaboration with attorneys at the National Security Division, could serve as an effective check on confirmation bias without unduly delaying time-sensitive applications. One more quick paragraph. As a way to ensure full consideration of the issues and applications that may present very difficult and vitally important issues, we recommend that the department seriously consider Baker's proposal for an official to challenge both a politically sensitive FISA application and other stages of the investigations. Nothing, former Attorney General Levi warned, can more weaken the quality of life or more imperil the realization of the goals we all hold dear than our failure to make clear by words and deed that our law is not the instrument of partisan purpose. That feels like a far different characterization than what you gave me, where he's saying that like, oh, it's such a waste of time. We're not even gonna recommend anything. It sounds like he's got a lot of faith and confidence in the FBI here. He's literally said they're already taking good steps to remedy these issues.
Made public by
so I've read through this report, not the whole thing, right? I'll tell you the article I had saved for it, right, where I'd read about him talking about the cultural rot at the FBI. It says
Control F culture. Let me see if I can find it.
So I don't know if he uses the exact word cultural rot or if it's something that I read in a media report describing the things that he was saying. From the Wall Street Journal, the report's 316 pages detail the FBI's failings at every turn. Mr. Durham describes how the Bureau initiated its probe based on a conversation between unpaid Trump advisor Papadopoulos and an Australian diplomat. No U.S. law enforcement or intelligence agency thought the conversation was evidence of collusion, but the FBI launched a formal investigation anyway without any significant review of its own intelligence databases or conducting interviews of witnesses essential to understand the raw information it received. The FBI also opened full investigation. Oh, where the fuck? I'm sorry. The special counsel takes the conclusion a step further, writing, quote, the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to law, thus describing a cultural rot, not merely the work of a few apples.
Okay, wait. Let me, can I read this real quick? Because this is good for both of us, okay? So I'm controlling what you're saying. So I'm getting, this part, it says conclusion, but it's page 27 out of 316. So I don't know, but I control F. Based on the review of the Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. As noted, former FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith committed a criminal offense by fabricating language in an email that was material to the FBI obtaining a FISA surveillance order. In other instances, FBI personnel working on the same FISA application displayed, at best, a cavalier attitude towards accuracy and completeness. FBI personnel also repeatedly disregarded important requirements when they continued to seek renewals of that FISA surveillance, while acknowledging, both then and in hindsight, that they did not genuinely believe there was probable cause to believe that the target was knowingly engaged in clandestine intelligence activities on behalf of a foreign power, or knowingly helping another person in such activities. And certain personnel disregarded significant exculpatory information that should have prompted investigative restraint and re-examination. Our investigation also reveals that senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor towards the information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities. This information, in part, triggered and sustained Crossfire Hurricane and contributed to the subsequent need for Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. In particular, there was significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded, directly or indirectly, by Trump's political opponents. The department did not adequately examine or question these materials and the motivations of those providing them, even when, at about the same time, the director of the FBI and others learned of significant and potentially contrary intelligence. Two more quick paragraphs. In light of the foregoing, there is a continual need for the FBI and the department to recognize that lack of analytical rigor, apparent confirmation bias, and an overwillingness to rely on information from individuals connected to political opponents caused investigators to fail to adequately consider alternative hypotheses and to act without appropriate objectivity or restraint in pursuing allegations of collusion or conspiracy between a U.S. political campaign and a foreign power. Although recognizing that in hindsight is much clearer, much of this also seems to have been clear at the time. We therefore believe it is important to examine past conduct to identify shortcomings and improve how the government carries out its most sensitive functions. Section 5 discusses some of these issues more fully. This report does not recommend any This report does not recommend any wholesale changes in the guidelines and policies that the department and the FBI now have in place to ensure proper conduct and accountability in how counterintelligence activities are carried out. Rather, it is intended to accurately describe the matters that fell under our review and to assist the Attorney General in determining how the department and the FBI can do a better, more credible job in fulfilling its responsibilities and in analyzing and responding to politically charged allegations in the future. Ultimately, of course, meeting those responsibilities comes down to the integrity of the people who take an oath to follow the guidelines and such. The answer is not the creation of new rules, but a renewed fidelity to the old. The promulgation of additional rules and regulations to be learned, and yet more training sessions will likely prove to be a fruitless exercise of the FBI's guiding principles of fidelity, bravery, and integrity are not ingrained in the hearts and minds of this one. Okay, gotcha. All right.
So it said what I said. Yeah. I was correct. I said that he basically said. I basically said he was saying the problem is the culture there. He wasn't even recommending new rules. He said the problem is the culture there. Is what I said. And that's what he says there. As such, the answer is not the creation of new rules, but a renewed fidelity to the old. The promulgation of additional rules and regulations to be learned in yet more training session would likely prove to be fruitless if the FBI's guiding principles of fidelity, bravery, and integrity. Let me finish this point real quick, right? If the guiding principles of fidelity, bravery, and integrity are not ingrained in the hearts and minds of those
I just read that.
Right. Yeah. So what he's saying is it's not a matter of creating new rules. It's that the people there, they didn't have fidelity, bravery, and integrity because they were acting corruptly. But I don't understand.
Corrupt. The word corrupt is not anywhere read into this. What he's saying is that the people were way too zealous because of their probably political biases, and that they weren't exercising the analytical rigor that we would expect our intelligence agencies to exercise as, borrowing words from his analysis. Corruption is not.
Then I would colloquially use the term corruption. Maybe legally it doesn't meet that definition, but I think that I'm within my rights to say that an FBI that is overzealous, enforcing their bias to unlawfully spy on people through things like FISA warrants would be corrupt.
Okay, that's fine. If that's your interpretation, that's okay, but that's not what Durham stated.
Okay. Now, I like getting to this again. The only reason we got onto this was me describing the discrepancy between how confidential human sources in the case of suspected Russian spy Igor Lutsenko that was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and how they didn't even talk to him at first, and he was unable to verify. And then when they did talk to him, he said, I don't know about any of this. It was just basically bar talk, right? They still spied on Trump's team as a result of that. But when we have a confidential human source saying, Joe, I talked to the guy in charge of Burisma, and he told me he paid $5 million to Joe Biden to fire Viktor Shokin. And then I told him that was a bad idea. And then later in 2016, when Trump won, I said, see, wasn't that a bad idea? Because now Hillary lost, and now it's going to be Trump, and he's going to be upset. And he said, don't worry about it. The current prosecutors, nothing will come to light. They'll bury the investigation, which is what happened.
Okay, but we don't know. We have no idea right now if a Hunter Biden investigation has taken place, right?
I would say it's not just a Hunter Biden investigation. It is an investigation into Joe Biden that would be warranted.
Okay.
But
I'm just to be clear, we don't know if any of these investigations have taken place, right?
I suppose you could say you don't know what you don't know. But
Well,
that's
we're
like,
not supposed. We literally have no evidence whatsoever that any of these investigations.
it would be hard for me to have evidence to prove a negative. That's true, right? But the question I have for you is, if we later find out definitively, if Chris Wray or someone comes out and says we have not investigated Joe Biden yet, will you admit that that is a double standard and negligent?
I don't know what other information the FBI has available to it. Will you admit that it's possible that the FBI has exculpatory information that would preclude an investigation?
I would assume that would be because they started an investigation to find that exculpatory evidence.
Well, you don't know that. Did they start an investigation to get this confidential human source to talk about Zlochevsky or whatever?
That I don't know. But it's clear
Okay, exactly.
that there
So, like,
seems
wait. Is it possible that this confidential informant was literally speaking because of an investigation into the Bidens?
I suppose it could be that it was an investigation into Hunter. But again, this is a stretch.
So
I'm just saying it's a stretch. Now I want to get back
Well,
to
none of this is true. I'm just saying we don't know. But okay, wait. Also, listen, hold on, because it's late. Do you work tomorrow?
No.
Okay. Do you want to? I start streaming tomorrow at like noon. Do you want to? We can go over all this tomorrow if you want to.
I'll have to talk to my wife. I'll message you later. But can I just make one quick point on the
make your final
financial?
plea, and then I'll be streaming all day tomorrow. You can hop in anytime. We can keep going over this.
Okay.
I've got a doc type of little stuff right now. Yeah,
There are a bunch of shell companies that we find out about the Bidens that the IRS tried to reach into, right, to find out where this money was coming from. There are a bunch of allegations that Joe Biden's living high in the hog and seems to be having more money than his salary would entail. The final thing I'll say about this is this. My contention has always been that there should be a non-double standard at places like the FBI. I think the fact that we see so much gnashing of the teeth at even an impeachment inquiry shows that it's not that people on the left that supported any investigation into people that they didn't like connected to Trump. It's not that they're worried about due process and norms. It's that they'll do anything to prevent the FBI and Joe Biden looking bad by having a serious public investigation into these allegations. There is more smoke here than there was with anything with Biden or with Trump. And that's why I'm saying the double standard is the lack of the FBI and the politicians' curiosity in investigating these things.
Okay. And you can say that, but every single person here, you included, knows that if you want to talk about smoke, even if he's done nothing wrong, Trump acts like the guiltiest motherfucker in the history of any person that has ever fucking opened their mouth ever. And he has never done himself any favors in terms of looking more guilty than any other motherfucker in the room constantly. Right?
But that shouldn't be the standard.
I understand
for FBI
but I'm just
investigations.
saying, we're not talking about FBI investigations. You are giving a broad pulse of the political climate, or a broad take of the political climate in the United States about people looking at Trump one way and looking at the Bidens another way. If you look at Biden and you look at his life of public service, of being a senator, of all of that, and you compare that to Trump's life of lies, of Obama birth certificate, of all the other the grandmother pussy and all this shit, to come away from that not trusting Trump as much as you might trust Biden, I don't think that takes a hardcore politically partisan mind. I think that's probably an ordinary thing that a lot of people would end up with no ill will or political bias being there. I'm just saying. Not saying that justifies the FBI acting in an improper way or in being politically partisan, but I can understand why people would view one person a bit differently than the other one.
Well, I think if they're biased, I think if you look back even before Biden was running out, remember he had to drop out of running for president once because of a plagiarism scandal. He lied just the other day about being at Ground Zero.
What was his plagiarism scandal? Joe Biden plagiarism scandal.
It was like in the, what was it, the election, 88? Did you find it?
It confirmed that Biden had used 5 pages of a law review article in a 15-page paper without quotation or citation in 1965. Oh, I'm sorry. This was in 1987?
Mm-hmm.
And when was this, when he went to school in 1965?
I don't know exactly. I forget the details.
Okay.
But
forgive me if I'm not taking that as seriously. 60 years ago?
No. It was about him. You could look it up. It derailed his campaign for president in like 87, 88. But yeah, I would say that he has had a long history repeat with lies. He lies almost every time he opens his mouth. He just lied. I just saw an NPR article.
Yeah, you're just...
real quick,
right, listen,
I just saw an NPR...
Okay. Because every time I look up something you're saying, right, I thought there was a huge plagiarism. I thought something serious happened. But now it sounds like he cheated. Was this in high school or college?
I don't know the exact details. I just know.
Okay, well, isn't that pretty important?
I think the fact that it was important enough that it forced him to drop out of the race in 1988 shows that there were allegations that he was someone plagiarizing that affected that election then. He dropped out. It was a big story then. I remember watching like Johnny Carson that was even making fun of Biden for it then. I don't know if the plagiarism scandal was because something he did in high school. I thought it had to do with like speeches and stuff that he was writing where he was supposedly stealing stuff from speeches on the campaign and stuff as well, in addition to things that he had done in papers that he had written. But I don't know the specifics of it. I'm just saying that there have been people that have been criticizing Joe Biden for being a liar since back in the 80s, right? You said grab him by the pussy was a reason to impugn Trump, that people would distrust him. I'm just saying that it's been known about Biden for a long time that this is something that people said, that he's duplicitous, he's all kinds of things that we could talk about. It's really irrelevant to the grand scheme of what we're talking about. I'm just saying, I don't think that Biden's this rosy character that you're portraying. His boy was a grand wizard of the KKK, right? Robert Byrd, that he eulogized, I believe, so.
I bet Donald Trump has probably talked to the guy too. Didn't he fly in Epstein's child rape plane? So I don't know why we would use like that connection.
Well,
to
it doesn't.
his character at all,
You
but-
can.
I mean, like,
I could. That's,
I'm just saying that what you just said means absolutely nothing. But okay, listen. Tomorrow, if there's more that you wanna, bring out,
Yeah, I'll
okay, we
message
can go over it. I'll be streaming all day tomorrow. Okay, so you
I'll
can hop on.
message
Okay.
you. All right. See you.
Love you. Bye.
1 second here. Let me find out how to get out of this call. Hopefully I'm not still. Oh, I am still in there. There we go. Yeah, so here's the thing. It's difficult to get contentious, really, when he's just having me outline a case, right? And the problem is that the defense of this is always going to be, well, we don't know. Maybe there was an investigation. The admission that I'm trying to get out of there is like, if these facts are true, is it at least meet the requirement for some sort of investigation, right? So, for example, if Destiny now later comes out and says, I'm against an impeachment inquiry, well, that would make him sort of full of shit, because even if there is a previous FBI investigation, there's no reason that even the people in Congress would know that, according to Destiny's own admission. And so therefore, why wouldn't he support, given the facts that we have on the ground, this sort of investigation, right? We didn't get into the actual details of what's going on. And Destiny is incredibly charitable to Biden in ways that I think that are just blatantly bad faith, right? In this, well, I don't want to say bad faith, blatantly partisan, right? For example, he's trying to make these claims of like, well, if Joe Biden was talking December 4th to his son, if he was talking to him, right, wouldn't that mean that it's no big deal if his son legitimately, yeah, that's ridiculous. I also want to point out again, almost every time, once more, that he had me, yeah, I don't know much about the plagiarism thing. I just know it forced him to drop out, so I can't really bring the heat on something that I just said sort of spur of the moment. That's sort of a red herring anyways. Well, the reason that the treatment of Trump is worse than Biden is because Trump looks like this grimy guy. Fuck that. So, the points that I think that are important to get out there, like if Biden had any talk whatsoever about his son, which, keep in mind, I didn't get to this, but he lied. He said, I never talked to my son about business. So if he's taking this call on December 4th and his son's talking to him about, well, Burisma, blah, 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 that's clearly corrupt and warrants an investigation of Joe Biden. Clearly. Like, bar none. I think even Pisco would admit that, right? So Destiny's defense of this is completely strange, right? And the idea that he's saying, well, it's just circumstantial evidence, we don't have proof. Again, what the whistleblowers and others are alleging is that they've been stymied from actually investigating these things, right? So, for example, they know, I didn't get to talk about it, but they know there's all these shell companies, right? They said, I think now over 20 shell companies. And what's a shell company? You have like Rosemont Seneca LLC and then Rosemont Seneca Organization, right? And it's like, well, what are these companies doing that they're getting all of this money, right? All of these companies under different names. There's also allegations that one of the business properties that was being made for one of these companies, that Hunter Biden requested a key for his father. So to say there's an allegation that Joe Biden got paid $5 million, well, is there any financial proof that he had that? Well, did we investigate? Did they subpoena his bank records? Did they try to get to the bottom of these shell companies? Destiny's like, well, maybe they did. We don't know. Well, what we know is when IRS agents were trying to look into it, they were told they couldn't do it. And we know that the Biden team is fighting back against releasing records and things like that. Tony G says, I think you're doing an amazing job showing the evidence that they will definitely understand the truth. Pisco, or Aftershock, if you're still there, Aftershock wants me to yell more at Destiny like I do Pisco. I feel like I'm on more of a conversational tone with Pisco than Destiny, if I'm quite honest. So I feel like Pisco's the type of guy I could say, go fuck yourself, you're an idiot. And it's not going to jeopardize us being able to talk in the future. I don't think that's the case with Destiny. I think I had a unique chance to talk to a large audience of Destiny's audience and be able to impart facts that they probably never heard before. So to just be like, go fuck yourself, you're an idiot or something like that, I don't think it would have been productive. No, you said you wish that I should treat Destiny more like Pisco. I thought that's what I read. I'm not coming at you. I'm just saying. So I don't know, but I thought that I outlined the case quite well. He wasn't pushing back really. You know, he came up with these lists of questions, and what's going to happen is he'll talk to someone like Pisco, and Pisco will go, I was trying to say this is what the defense would be. And to his credit, that's fine if he's like, I'm not interested in that right now. I'm just trying to get a ground level of the facts. And then I assume he'll look into it. And then maybe tomorrow, I'll talk to my wife to see if I'll be able to stream. Maybe tomorrow I will be able to have an actual debate with him on this when he says, here's what's going on. But I do want to point out this. Can anyone show me, despite the claims that have been told by Destiny about me in the past, that I lie more than almost anyone that he's seen? Again, I am proud to say, can you show me one time Destiny said, wait, show me a source for that, where I was incorrect with what the source said? Even the Durham report there. I said, he basically said, like, he wasn't even recommending changing laws, that it was this cultural problem. That's exactly what it doesn't use the word cultural, but isn't that right? Isn't that what it said when we read through it? Yes, that's exactly it. When I said that Devon Archer testified that Zlochevsky said, I'm under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, call your dad. Isn't that what it said? Yes, that's exactly what it said. I'm not saying I'm infallible. Sometimes I will say things that maybe I'll later find out were incorrect. It has happened. But overwhelmingly, I try to say things because I've read the source material, which means that I'm right about what it says most of the time. That might not mean that I'm right about what conclusions I draw from it, but oftentimes when I'm saying this said this, I'm usually right. And in the prior debates I've had with Destiny, this happens. He'll say, wait, show me Joe Biden being critical of the vaccine. I'm able to show it, right? Wait, show me Flynn saying, I don't recall that could have happened. We go to the Flynn 302. I'm able to show it. Yeah, a cold slice of bread says, I'm making logical inferences, but because it's logical, the left's not going to do that. Their bias will allow them to give the most charitable interpretation possible. That's why my argument's not about Joe Biden. My argument's about, we set this in let me be quite clear. Excuse me, where I'm coming from. By the way, do you think that it occurred to Destiny there that his audience of how many people does he have watching? 5,000 people more? Just heard for the first time the scathing conclusion of the Durham report? Do you aware of that? Do you think any of them will let that sink in? Wait a minute, I'm reading a report that basically is like at every level in this investigation into Trump, the FBI was zealous and had this culture that was just ridiculous. Do you think for a second that hit home? To me, that's a good place to look as a starting point. I believe the FBI is corrupt long before Trump, don't get me wrong. But it's such a good place for a starting point because with Trump, something changed. With Trump, as predicted by me, they took the gloves off. With Trump, we're told it's okay to have these overarching investigations into Trump, 2 impeachments, the Russia collusion stuff, starting the investigations immediately, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The bar was very low for what justified opening an investigation when it came to Trump. And then when he complains about the fact that we're tearing his life upside down, we'll say, oh, that complaining's obstruction, more investigations, more special counsels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Brianna Wu is on Tim Pool. Damn, I would love to get on Tim Pool's show. That's one of the reasons I'm talking to Destiny. If you could clip today and tomorrow, if I talk to Destiny tomorrow, sections of that, if anyone could clip that, and then try to, tweet out or something to get the attention of Tim Pool. Because Destiny's been on Tim Pool. Brianna goes on Tim Pool. I think that I have a command of these facts far greater than they do. Yeah, he didn't know who Zlochevsky was or Shokin. It's just... Now I understand what's going on. He's going to have a debate coming up with actual Justice Warrior, so he's trying to get an idea of the things AJW might say to him, which is fine. That's smart. That's not a bad idea. But his defenses are nonsense. Well, maybe there was an investigation. Okay, well, what if there wasn't? Well, we don't know. Maybe they had reasons to not have an investigation. How would we ever be able to determine then whether or not that there is a double standard? The FBI could literally just always choose to never investigate anyone that they wanted, that they like, even if it's obvious corruption, and their excuse could be, well, you don't know. Maybe we are investigating in the background. Maybe we are. Maybe we investigated and exonerated. You don't know. It's unacceptable. But anyways, I was getting to the starting point is, because the standard was set with Trump, that's it. That's the standard. That's what we accept at the FBI now. Unlawful FISA warrants, insurance policy. So if that's going to be the game played, okay. That's all I want, an equal standard. Now, how's their treatment of Joe Biden? Oh, it's completely opposite? We actually have whistleblowers saying, like, dude, they won't even leave us look into this shit? And it's something that kind of struck me today as I was looking at what people defending Biden were saying. They're like, show us the evidence. Where's the evidence? Would you show me the evidence? The whole point of the inquiry is to find evidence. It's an impeachment inquiry. We know these shell companies exist. We know that the whistleblowers at the FBI were trying to look into this stuff more, and they were told, like, you can't ask about Joe Biden, you can't talk to certain family members, you can't do any of that. So if you're not allowed to look for evidence, it's not then an argument to say, okay, we have circumstantial evidence, but show me the actual evidence. Oh, we don't allow you to look for it? Well, there you go. There's no evidence. Why have an inquiry? You tell me, Pisco. Did I say it's been proven? Where did I say that? Show me one time ever that I said it's been proven. One time. Show me, Pisco. In fact, I've been quite explicit with you multiple times. I'm not saying 100% smoking gun guaranteed that Joe Biden's guilty of something. I've said that many times. My target has never been Joe Biden. My target has been, why has there been a double standard from the FBI and things like that? Yes, to a reasonable certainty. I did say to a reasonable certainty. Is that the standard in a court of law? Based on the evidence now, I have reasonable certainty that Joe Biden acted corruptly. Yes, I do. That wouldn't be enough for me to convict him, based on the evidence I have now. But it's certainly that reasonable certainty justifies the minimum standard that I'm looking for, which is there should have been an investigation. Pisco, if you want to jump on real quick, I could talk to you for like a half an hour. And I know we're going to do a debate in this, so we don't have to debate. I was just more thinking to ask your opinions on what Destiny said. But we are, Pisco and me, I think, are supposed to be debating this subject Monday. So I don't want to just sit here and yell at each other for 2 hours or 5 hours like we do. This piece of shit, Pisco, I think is still on vacation. This guy is like an international playboy, man. I just picture he's like on some beach in Australia, like drinking a Mai Tai or something, like on his phone yelling at me about Burisma. He's probably got like family and loved ones like, put down the damn phone, Pisco. What are you doing? I gotta make one more point here with Rob about Burisma. Just one more. Then I'll get back to our game of shuffleboard or whatever we're playing. Let me see if I can find... Why can't I find Pisco's name here? Stardust? When the hell was I talking to her? Oh, there he is. Yeah, my wife says, I follow Pisco on Twitter just to hear someone bitch about you as much as I do. Also true. Yeah, no, Tika D, I don't think that's happened. Right? That alone should justify the business partner saying, having an email that says 10% of the money from this is going to the big guy, and the business partner Tony Bobulinski saying, well, the big guy is Joe Biden. That alone justifies an investigation to look into Joe Biden's bank records. That would be enough. In my opinion, that's more smoke than anything Donald Trump was connected to. Pisco, let me know when... Oh, there you are. Hey, what's up? You're muted.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. On the beach?
No. It's winter here, bro.
Oh shit, yeah, whatever. I'm U.S. centric. Everything's my time, so I don't give a shit about season.
How do you think that went? I mean, you didn't really have an opportunity to argue.
Right. That's that. Yeah. I think my understanding is that I think he's going to be debating actual justice warrior here. So I think he's probably
so he's using you and us.
Right. Which is fine by me because I get a chance to give my side of the story to his audience.
Sure.
But I think that I'll say my opinion of the little bit of argumentation we have. You tell me if you agree or disagree. I think he is arguing some of the worst defenses of this. I think the defense of like, well, maybe he did talk to Hunter Biden on December 4th and Hunter was telling him about, oh, Shokin's looking into us, but that's a terrible defense. You would agree with that.
Oh, you mean the defense of everyone thought that Burisma and Zlochevsky was genuinely a good person?
Yeah.
And there was
that's
terrible... I don't think that's very strong because if that's true, then the State Department are a bunch of liars because then at a bare minimum, Joe Biden would be letting that influence his decision when he said it hasn't.
That's right.
And where the State Department says it hasn't. And so it's not a good argument to say everyone just thinks he's been
I think that you tell me if I'm wrong. My interpretation, and I sort of told Destiny this, I feel like Destiny's looking at this like from the perspective of Burisma or Blue Star, where it's like, well, sure, lobbyists, of course, there's nothing wrong with them. Just like a defense lawyer, there's nothing wrong with a defense lawyer making a strong defense of their client. Of course not. The lobbyist, I don't blame the lobbyist that's being paid for lobbying, of course, but that's not the person we're analyzing. It would be inappropriate for Joe Biden, particularly on December 4th, to be taking a call from his son, and that call, he's like, hey, Pops, let me talk to you about these investigations. No,
you can't. Yeah,
and if he heard that, then the appropriate thing Joe Biden had to be like, dude, I can't talk about this. I'm hanging up the phone. He can't sit there and hear him out. That's ridiculous.
It's because it's a conflict of interest. And I would be okay if Hunter Biden was lobbying the State Department and Joe Biden had recused himself from that decision, then it would be fine for Hunter Biden to do it, right?
Well, no, not if he didn't register as a foreign lobbyist.
Well, no, what I mean is from the perspective of Joe Biden, if Joe Biden has recused himself, then and Hunter Biden is just lobbying the State Department, then I don't really see a corruption issue that can be sort of moved to Joe Biden from that. And I don't really see like a conflict of interest necessarily in that, unless just having the name Biden is enough that you can never be a lobbyist, which I don't know. Assuming that Hunter Biden was there's some question. I think one of the questions of why he's not being charged with FARA stuff, or why he might not be, is, can you prove that he ever talked to anybody, right, in America?
But we can
for that purpose, right?
But we
don't have to get into that. But
right, like Amos Hutchinson, that's the special envoy. We know that he was talking to Joe Biden and was like, "Yeah, what's up with your son working for Burisma?" Then we know that he had lunch and had a conversation with Hunter Biden. Like, I talked to your dad about this, and we know Hutchinson was on the actual airplane to Kiev when Biden came up with the quid pro quo. So, I mean, I think the evidence is pretty damn convincing that he was foreign lobbying. But nonetheless, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea for Destiny to try to get like one of the things that struck me is, for as many times as I've had this conversation with Destiny, and let me defend him a little here. I know he has conversations with people all the time. His job's being a streamer. He's talking to people 6-7 hours a day. I get that. But like, I don't think he knows the bare minimum of this. Like, I don't think he knows who Zlochevsky does.
He doesn't know shit.
Right. And so to be
he's an intuition guy.
Right.
He's a gut guy. My gut says this.
And so when he's so confident in the past, when we've talked like, you're full of shit, you're wrong. It's like, dude, you don't even know the bare minimum. Right. And like, the one time I was talking to him, I said, like, one of the things that one of the defenses people had of Joe Biden was actually he was firing Shokin because he wasn't investigating Burisma. That's one of the things I've heard. And Destiny was like, no one said that. And then like he later reads an article from Daryl Kalyanick where she says, like, in fact, one of the reasons they wanted him gone was not firing Shokin. And he's just like, whoa, what are you, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm just saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You could say that's not the reason.
Burisma, you mean, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You could say that, well, dude, that's not the reason that they gave. That's not this. It was a greater thing. But I said there were people that part of their defense was.
Say it.
Yeah, and I was like, that's a stupid thing to say because I don't believe Joe Biden wanted his son investigated harder. That seems ridiculous. I'm upset that Viktor Shokin is investigating this company my son's on the board of directors for harder. It's an absurd position. But
that's why I think that. I think that Steven in general, he's a gut guy, and on this issue, you can't really be a gut guy because you need to have the facts available, and so. I was throwing out in his chat a little bit because I was like, "Why you're not? Because I thought it was going to be a debate." And so
Me too.
I was like, "You're not prepared for this."
Excited to do.
Yeah, I was like, "You're not
guess.
prepared for this. You're going to do." And so I was a little bit pleasantly surprised at his approach, and not horribly mad at you being fairer than I thought you were going to be in terms of your...
I was even trying to think of you and say, like, in the timeline, be like, no, Pisco would say this. But he's like, don't even say that. I was like, okay. If you don't want But that's what I was trying. I was legitimately trying to do. And I also tried to leave out a lot of specific... I wasn't talking about Onishenko. I wasn't because I was like, I don't want to overcomplicate the story, the bare bones of it, because I knew what he was trying to do. But, I think that, looking at it, I did a debate last night that I think it's similar from people that are, one of the reasons I like talking to you, even though I think you're partisan beyond belief in the hack on this shit, yes. But at least you'll talk about the details because so many people that I debate, they just go with these overarching like gut feelings. So like last night, I'm in a debate on Cherry's channel, and we're talking about whether or not there's a double standard in like the treatment of January 6 people versus like violent left-wing rioters and stuff like that, right? And I'm debating I'm really important in straighter aid, and basically the two arguments they end up making when I'm talking like specifics and looking at like the actual charges that they face, the U.S. codes and stuff like that. I'm not relitigating the debate. I'm just telling you their defense was, and I'm quoting, Tim Kelly's a Republican and a jury found them guilty, therefore it must all be legit. And I'm like,
the district court judge.
Yes, and I'm like, but those aren't arguments when we're talking about the specifics, right? And I'm like, and IRI does that in the past. Like, he'll be like, well, James Comey was a Republican. But if I'm citing specific evidence of wrong, like that's good for like a general conversation. Like, well, you would suspect it's like a stereotype. If I see a big tall person, I might say, hey, they're pretty good at basketball. But then all of a sudden I see that they're a computer nerd and they've never picked up a basketball in their life. I say, oh, despite the fact that tall people are usually good at basketball, my more specific evidence shows this person isn't. So like when I'm saying, well, this is specifically what I think was a double standard that was done by, say, Peter Strzok, saying, yeah, but Peter Strzok's a Republican, so therefore he must have liked Trump. It's fucking stupid. Listen, that's a stupid argument.
You can discount it and say, in this case, it doesn't matter. But in the conversations about double standards and corruptions, like I think you would find it relevant if everyone who was investigating Trump had donated to the Democrats. And so, like, I do think it's relevant. It might not be dispositive. It might not be, and you might not even think it's super significant. I'm not surprised why they bring it up. I bring it up sometimes and be like, by the way, like, his handpicked AG was the one in charge of the Hunter Biden investigation. It's not a defeater in the sense that I need to know more things, but it's just one point, right?
Right, and I don't want to bring it up, but that can't be your defense, like your sole defense. Because, like, for example, the jury argument, because we're talking about whether or not a D.C. jury could be corrupt, like, they're like, well, if a jury convicts, and I'm like, but that's stupid because, like, I'll admit.
There's bad convictions.
Yeah. Of course, we could look at, like, all white juries in the past that were basically lynching black people. Like, it would be absurd to say, well, if they found them guilty, that's that. No need to look if there was a double. It's like, now, come on. You know better than that.
And the jury's only there really to assign the factual questions. And I think the better kind of arguments have to do with interpretations of facts that no one's disputing, right? So like I don't think that you're disputing that Enrico Tarrio sent certain messages or had certain ideas or like did certain conduct. The question is how to interpret that and legally how to distinguish it.
I was arguing with Cherry, because I got fed up. It was like 20 minutes on this jury shit. And I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about? This is so dumb. And Cherry was like, well, I think it's relevant. And I was like, but the reason I don't think it's relevant really is, one, the reasons we already said that, yeah, juries could be biased. So just to say if a jury says it, that's the end all be all, it's dumb. But secondly, because if you're involved in the legal system like you would be being a lawyer, you understand that a lot of times a convincing prosecutor can convince juries of shit that might technically be against the law, but sort of against the spirit of it. For example, obstructing official proceedings. You could technically probably bring that charge to the people that were in Kevin McCarthy's office yesterday. Right? You might be able to.
I don't know.
Or the Kavanaugh protesters. Right? And a lot of the double standard.
I think the Kavanaugh one maybe a better case there.
Okay, but I'm just saying a lot of the double standard can occur before the trial is even brought, right? Like in the tools that are used investigatively and in the indictments
that's what I mean.
they decided to bring,
You should be able to obviate all this, and I'm sure you did this, or I'm sure you mentioned it, and even if you didn't, I think it should be easy to get to. Like, I don't even pretend that the conviction hasn't come yet. Right, like pretend that we're just talking about the charges being brought,
right?
And they'll just analyze that, right? So then if there's absolutely no relevance on the conviction part, the only question is why were charges brought in one case and not the other,
right? And I didn't say that's a far more succinct way. I didn't say that, but that's the point I was getting to, right? But yeah, so I do agree. I think that Destiny, at least he's trying to get informed of the facts a little more. I will say this, what you're against an impeachment inquiry?
I am against an impeachment inquiry because I think, one, the basis of it at this point is there's no additional information from the investigations we've had in the past to warrant it. And also because I think the reasons for it are not in good faith.
Well, I don't think...
As you say, I think you and I both agree that this is a ploy. Nothing's going to come of it. And it's a ploy for a civil war in the House. And for Kevin McCarthy to keep his gavel. That's it. That's the reason why Kevin McCarthy is doing it. It's not because he actually believes it or he thinks it's going to go anywhere. I don't think they have
I
much
agree with that,
into
but
it.
I feel the same about the Trump impeachments. The Trump impeachments were never about the fact there was always going to be a Trump impeachment. They talked about it day one. So I don't think the people that were talking about impeaching Trump his first day in office were good faith.
They weren't
they
could have impeached him for Mueller and they didn't.
Well, theoretically, but you could say the same about Biden. There are people that say that you could impeach Biden for the border situation and stuff like that. I mean, it's a political process. My point of it is I don't understand why a more open hearing to get to the facts of this case would be something that you frown upon. There's clearly evidence there that suggests there could be wrongdoing.
If for my personal purposes, for my interest in it, I'm interested in this topic and having more people talk about it. And more witnesses come if I was in charge of knowing the information, great. I just think it's a political stunt and it's not being done for that purpose. And the spirit of it, if all they want to do is subpoena people, they can subpoena people before. But the announcement and the framing of it as an impeachment inquiry, I think is done for a specific purpose.
What if they subpoenaed and the subpoena weren't met?
I think that the administration should comply with the.
But what if they don't?
Subpoenas?
They might not. Eric Holder didn't.
Yeah. So I think in general, I don't think unless there's a really good reason or a really good claim of executive privilege, which I think, with respect to these things, if it's private business records, if it's that kind of thing, I don't think that those are. And if it's classified stuff, the congressional people can. They're able to hear that stuff, and so I think in general, I would support the administration complying with
but
congressional
if they don't, would you support impeachment then?
Impeachment for obstruction of Congress?
Correct.
If Biden is, I would say, in bad faith, not complying, I would support his impeachment.
That's quite the caveat.
Obstruction of Congress.
In bad faith, that's quite the caveat, isn't it?
Well, that's what I mean. If there is a genuine basis for withholding, which you agree sometimes there is a genuine basis for withholding, and we can have disagreements about what that genuine basis is, then that will work itself out in the courts, and they should comply with whatever the court rule is.
Given what we know, just the facts that we know that could be confirmed publicly, do you think that somebody, whether it be, you probably wouldn't say the House oversight or anything like that, but perhaps the FBI, the IRS, or some, should be subpoenaing Joe Biden's bank records?
Yeah,
you think that should happen?
If they're serious about the investigation into, and I'm sure they probably have, unless they're saying they can't have access to to all his bank records.
Okay, but that's interesting because this is the Destiny. I find this an argument to be incredibly annoying. Well, for all we know, all of this stuff happened. There could be little specific things, but there hasn't been a massive investigation into Joe Biden or anything like that.
If you're announcing an impeachment inquiry and you're not following up, like with his bank records, or you're not following up with people that you can subpoena, like for instance, if you're going to go through the DOJ angle, if you're not hearing from David Weiss, or if you're not hearing from whoever it is who wants to talk about it, even if it's against your side, then I think why are you doing an impeachment inquiry, right?
Okay,
why would you do an impeachment inquiry and not look into his bank
get
records,
that. That's
right?
sort of a different question. What I'm saying, but the question I'm asking, because this is what I'm getting to, we both understand at this point that the FBI should have subpoenaed Joe Biden's bank records. So if they didn't, why not?
No, okay. I think for the DOJ investigation, there was an investigation into the Burisma matter, and I do not know the level of investigatory techniques applied by the FBI and DOJ. I just don't know that.
That's true, but
and
should they? Do you
the
think
congressional basis, the congressional impeachment inquiry right now, like now that you're at a level at which it's been announced, it's a political process. I don't really have the cat's out of the bag, but the use of subpoenas by the DOJ, as opposed to other investigatory techniques, I would need to know the timeline of the investigation to know whether that was appropriate. Okay. I think it's a different kind of calculus with impeachment.
Then let me say this. Seeing as how you said, given what we know, that his bank record should be subpoenaed by some sort of body, and that once the impeachment inquiry starts, that would make it obvious that they would do that, then why wouldn't, even if you think the impeachment inquiry is bad faith for the reason that Kevin McCarthy
Why would I support it?
Why wouldn't you support it? Because you're going to get access to evidence that you say is worth looking at.
I think it's a waste of time, and I think that there's no point to it. And I think that the investigation has been done before by Senate Republicans, and I think that you can come to the conclusion. I think you can come to the conclusion that there's no basis to think corruption without access to the bank records. And also, yes, the Senate Republicans got tens of thousands of documents, and so have the House Republicans. So I'm not sure that they've gotten some bank records. And I think it's a big waste of time and money. So I think that
but when you said
there should be an impeachment inquiry? No, but if a serious impeachment inquiry would probably include analysis of the financial records of the president. So
I don't want to keep you here all night, I promise. But I'm confused because you said that you do think that these records, some investigative body should have subpoenaed or looked at bank records. And if they hadn't, and now there will be, why wouldn't you support at least that and say, well, even though I think that it's bad faith why they're doing it, yeah, I think it'll be exonerating anyway, so I think they should look at these bank records.
I'll try to be as clear as possible. I do not support an impeachment inquiry in 2023. I think it's being done in bad faith, and I think that enough investigation has been done not uncovering any kind of explanation of misconduct. That said, in the context of an impeachment inquiry, where we're trying to essentially decide whether or not we bring this to the Senate at all, if you're going to undercover every stone, then you should get those bank records. But that doesn't mean that I think in the first place you should start this chain of events that leads to that. I don't know if that makes sense. Or
I get what you're trying to say. I think that there's a discrepancy there, but that's fine. I don't like.
We'll talk about. I want to be clear.
I know what you're saying. You're saying like, listen. I think if you're going through the motions for political reasons to do this, then absolutely at that point get it all out in the open and do these investigations. But previously, you don't think that it was warranted.
You should go through the motions. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I disagree with that. I think that there's enough smoke that there should have been a look at these bank records previously. And you might say, well, maybe they did. Fine. We're not going to adjudicate that here. But I'm just asking you, if they didn't, would you think that that would be negligent?
No, not necessarily.
See, and that's what makes it difficult to not call you bad faith. I mean, come on.
Not necessarily. Hang on a second. Because you have an investigation, the scope of the investigation matters. And even though there's a low bar to investigations, I don't think that we would be okay in the Trump case just a freewheeling inquiry into all misconduct all the time, right? And so in the case of the bank records, why would you want the bank records? Well, you want the bank records if they relate to any illegal transfer of money to Joe Biden, right?
Right.
And so how would you track down those illegal transfers, or what basis do you have that there is an illegal transfer? My understanding is the accusation of the $5 million or whatever from the FD10 whatever, that came in 2017, correct?
Now listen, there's confusion
the
about.
bribe?
I think we've looked at it together and said because the report's 2020, but I think it says he first reported it in 2017. I could be reading that wrong, but I think that was both of our reading of it.
I think so, but again, I'm not sure. That's why I want to.
Let me see.
We don't have information about it says that something happened in 2017, but whether or not
serialized in January 2nd, 2018 is when it says the first comments.
Serialized?
It was serialized
2018
in January 2nd, 2018. So the beginning of 2018.
What does serialized mean? I don't even know what that means.
I don't know. It says serial 212 a FD 1023 by CHS serialized on 10. So I mean serialized I think would mean
I mean they got a number for the report. I don't know.
Yeah,
they got
like put in
serial number.
Well, I would just. This is way going out on a limb here because I don't understand how these things work. But I would assume that means they probably have many files on this CHS. So serializing it, like putting it in order, a file number, you know what I mean? So like if I was a CHS 43 times and, serial 4101 is the first, serial 4102 is my second report, something like that. That's what I assume. But it's clear they're saying there was an FD 1023 created on January 2nd, 2018.
Yeah, listen, if a grand jury subpoena, that kind of document retrieval for the DOJ, right? That's usually like a pretty big investigatory step. People find out about those, right? People find out about grand jury subpoenas because
don't tell Destiny that. He thinks that it's all secret. Hush, hush.
Well, usually people find out about it because you go to the security in whatever. So even if there's no leaks, there's like we're seeing some activity in the DC District Court or something like that, right? And then eventually, usually there's someone that you're talking to or some secretary. You pick up something or someone intentionally leaks. Well, sometimes it's the grand jury participants themselves, who I don't believe are necessarily sworn to secrecy. They might be. I'm not sure. But anyway.
Yeah, it's irrelevant, but I get what I try. One of the things is we talk about this process, and you maybe more than me being in the legal system might have a better idea of some of these things, but these things like FDI 1023s and 302, like the average process of it, it's difficult to know what an average one looks like. An average event.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's like, did you ever watch the show How It's Made? We need like a How It's Made FBI investigation. Here's the lame shit in the background. the filing of paperwork and the process.
These are very.
It matters.
No one-to-one comparison to this shit,
right? It matters in these comparisons, and it's difficult because it's not like I could turn into the Wall Street Journal and they're outlining how this normally looks. So,
but I just wanted to ask you, like, if Donald Trump, there's a difference between news that he was subpoenaed by some House committee and like, oh shit, a federal grand jury has been impaneled and there are subpoenas out for Donald Trump's whatever, right? When that happened with respect to the Mar-a-Lago documents, that was big fucking news, right? That was big mama news. Not as big news as like, oh, they want his tax returns in Congress, even though there's not a really big, like huge whatever, right?
Correct.
That difference is one that I respect. And so the basis of getting impaneling a federal grand jury, I think that there should be based on the ramifications that could have. I think that there should be like at least some threshold for that. I think that threshold. That's why every investigatory technique has a different, in my mind, threshold.
A different threshold, right?
A FISA warrant, a grand jury subpoena, the start of investigation. Those are different, and so I'd just be careful about that and mindful that people treat the congressional subpoena different than the the federal subpoena.
Could be true, but given the standard that we've seen of the unlawful and overzealous, we'll use those words, investigative techniques deployed against Donald Trump by the FBI in 2016, I think that we have more than enough evidence to subpoena these bank records. Not just the 1023, which on its own, that sort of allegation would seem to warrant a serious investigation to find out if money like that had ever been transferred, given what we know about these shell companies and things like that have been set up. But even more importantly than that is if Donald Trump's son was involved in business dealings with corrupt foreign entities, and his business partners said, yes, in that email that says 10% goes to the big guy, the person they're referencing is Donald Trump. You could guarantee they would have been investigating and subpoenaing his records to find out if that was the case.
Well, I'm not sure. As Donald Trump as private citizen?
No, Donald Trump because at this point, the big guy getting 10% would be during the time that he was vice president, correct?
Was it? I'm not sure about that.
That I guess I have to check. Let me retract that as a positive. That's what I think, but I cannot confirm that that's absolutely
I thought
the
that
case.
I thought that email was in 2017, but I could be wrong.
But the money's
good.
Right. Okay. But even still, even
if it's traced to some conduct in office, then I don't know. Then you can make a case that it's delayed payment based on some official act.
Correct.
But again, that's the case you have to make.
So, but I think if he is getting, would you admit this? If we would confirm that even while he was briefly out of office, he was taking money from these Chinese firms and things like that, it would certainly call into question other forms of money that Hunter Biden was getting in business dealings during his tenure. And I think it would justify an investigation.
It would call into question his statements on the record that he had no substantive involvement with his son's business dealings. If his son is arranging for him to be a 10% stakeholder in something, right? Then I think that actually happened, then I don't think it's reasonable to think, or I think the reasonable assumption is that he knew about his 10% ownership stake and it wasn't just a fucking birthday present, right?
And you can't just look at it in a vacuum, right? Like, so if let's say that let's steelman the position. Let's say that 10%, if it was that 10% going to the big guy was from Joe Biden's tenure after his vice presidency, so when he's a civilian. We don't just look at it in a vacuum, though, because we could see while he was vice president, Hunter Biden was also engaged in similar business deals with often shady foreign entities as well. And Joe Biden was involved in policies that affected some of those people. And Joe Biden was personally meeting with some of these people at dinners and stuff. So looking at all of that circumstantial evidence with then if we had proof that he was immediately out of office getting paid 10%, I think that justifies an investigation to make sure that he wasn't also being paid while he was vice president.
Yeah, I mean, all that same stuff in terms of the balance of equities, I think applies equally to the Ivanka Jared situation, right? And if all we're talking about is we can't tie a specific policy act or official act to sources of revenue, and the revenue streams occurred after in time of someone's being in office, if that's what it takes to find it suspicious, I don't know. That seems like a little bit.
Well, and what I've always said is,
and you're going to subpoena all records, like
right. Here's
what.
But they've already started the standard with Trump, where they've been overzealous in subpoenas and things. Like even you admit that the most grotesque step that's been taken in any of this, more than a grand jury subpoenaing bank records, worse than any of that is a violation of someone's rights, is an unlawful FISA warrant, because that tears your life completely apart. And they did that to Trump's team. Go ahead.
Can I talk about that? Yeah.
Sure.
So the reason why I would say something is unlawful is because I think there's a pretty good chance that without the Steele dossier reporting, there wouldn't have been probable cause for a warrant, right? And a warrant without probable cause is unconstitutional. If something's unconstitutional, it's unlawful, right? So that's my basis for saying that I think the FISA warrants are probably unlawful because they relied on information and excluded exculpatory evidence that undermined probable cause, right? Maybe they could have still gotten there, but certainly the procedural problems with the Steele, the Lutsenko revelations and shit like that, undermines the case for probable cause in at least the renewals. So the FISA warrant stuff is problematic. It was wrong for the DOJ to go about it the way they did, and I'm glad that they have like edited their procedures or whatever. And even I think
they didn't change anything. They didn't even the Durham report. By the way, I tricked Destiny into reading the conclusion of the Durham report to his audience.
You tricked it,
right? Like, isn't that nice? That's the first time that audience will.
I was complaining about it in chat. Yeah, I was listening the whole time. And
by the way, isn't it amazing? Like, you could disagree with my conclusions of stuff, but I think I have a 95% accurate record when I say something says something of it actually saying it. You might say, yeah, but you're concluding something wrong. So what I said about the Durham report, I actually panicked for a minute. I was like, oh fuck, maybe I overspoke. Maybe I read that in an article about the Durham report. But no, I read like the first 70 pages, and I did read that where he was, so. But what I'm trying to like on this point specifically, Pisco, like that's a bigger deal than you make it out to be, right? The idea that's like, oh, shame on them, wag your finger, like because. One of the things, I don't know if you'll agree to this or not, we would both, I think, theoretically, I think that you're so biased you can't see it, but you would at least say that you would agree that we should have basically an equal application of the law. That's certainly something that's important to me. But we also understand that equal is not always exactly equal. For example, to get a grand jury subpoena on a president probably requires a threshold that maybe is higher than to get a grand jury subpoena on, me or some just average person. I think
there's more considerations.
Correct, because the FBI understands the implication that the results of what they're doing may literally swing the balance of power in the country. For example, if they get a
but that doesn't mean don't do it.
That's right? Correct. It just means that you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's. Everything you have to make sure, because you understand the consequences. You're doing something that's unprecedented. You're getting a FISA warrant to spy on a presidential campaign and then a presidential team as you renewed those warrants. You have to be damn sure that it meets that threshold, that everything is being done by the book, because it would be so terrible if you were wrong in what you did, because it has the ability. And that's what happened. That is the biggest scandal politically, as far as I know, in the history of this country. The FBI spied on Donald Trump. They spied on his presidency.
Oh,
they did.
What do you mean they spied on his presidency?
I mean,
the FISA warrant.
They had FISA warrants that enabled them to have access to his team, basically his entire team's communications, while he was running for office and while he was president for the first year.
It wouldn't have allowed that kind of access.
You don't think that? You think Bill Binney's wrong when he talks about the 2-hop rule?
Well, the rule related to you can have surveillance of the person. Mm-hmm. That's my and it's a far-reaching warrant in the sense that it allows you to do a lot with respect to the individual, but like you wouldn't be able to go set a bug in Trump Tower, right? You couldn't use it to search Trump's residences. You might be able to use it to search. Oh my God, what's his name? Oh my God, why am I losing his name? Carter Page's residence, but not so. Like I think it matters that the FISA warrant wasn't of Trump; it was of Carter Page. Now that doesn't mean that the political considerations should go out the window, but. Just to say that I think it's a little much to say that Donald Trump himself was spied on, and the level of access that the FBI would have over Donald Trump's communications in his campaign, I think that you're overstating it by quite a bit.
Well, I disagree because I think that you're technically right in that I don't know that this would give them like the old-fashioned like put a bug under your desk, and hear what you're saying in your office. I don't know that they could have done that to Donald Trump, but I think that this warrant would have given them access to all sort of emails, text messages, phone calls that he made with people within 2 hops. So it's not like direct in real time, I'm sitting in listening on the call. It gives them access if they want any material which is two hops from Carter Page to get access to that material, which would mean that they would be able to have any campaign emails that were sent from the campaign team, any presidential emails as a part of when Carter Page was in communication. My understanding is the two hop rule goes within communications of people within 18 months. So they would be able to continue to get those during Trump's presidency, as far as I'm concerned. And regardless, like, even if you think that I'm somewhat overstating it, I mean, it is unprecedented to get a FISA warrant on a president's team. I don't understand what I'm constantly shook and how people that claim to care about double standards are so flippant. Well, the FBI changed some policies and those people are gone. It's all good. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. It's understanding why people like me don't trust the FBI. They set the standard with that investigation into Trump. And when we look at investigations into Hillary, or in this case, when we're looking at investigations into Joe Biden, it seems that the constant defense is, but for them to actually look at this bank records, there's very high thresholds for this sort of stuff. That the consequence of them in the tools that they used that were unlawful in literally getting a FISA warrant, the most intrusive warrant probably possible in this country to go after Trump's team, it then becomes hollow to say, but there's this really high threshold that we need to look at bank records. And I'm just saying, I think that, I'm not saying this just because it's like, I suspect Joe Biden might have done something. It's not that we don't have massive circumstantial evidence. We see that the Biden family is getting this money. We see that there are shell companies. We see that there are emails saying that Hunter Biden gives a bunch of this money to his dad. We see a business partner saying the big guy getting 10% is Joe Biden. We see a confidential human source saying that Joe Biden was paid $5 million. All of this is clearly enough smoke to have a look into the bank records of Joe Biden. I think that's beyond dispute.
I don't think it's beyond dispute.
For good faith.
Again, so you're this FISA warrant shenanigans that occurred, and you think that it's flippant to call it shenanigans because you think it's some intentional corruption. Again, I have questions about that because it's odd to me that if the intent of the FBI and the DOJ at this point in time in the investigation is to fuck with the Trump campaign, are you going after Carter Page because that's like an easy target? So there's some motivational questions I have.
Yes, that's exactly why you would go after. You would go after Carter Page because there are confirmed facts about Carter Page that made the story much simpler. Like, it was confirmed that Carter Page was a doofus previously and had run-ins with goofy Russians. And then once the CIA confronted him about it, he turned basically confidential source for the CIA and helped him bring down those Russians. We also know from public available documents that Carter Page was giving speeches at Russian universities and something like that. So if you wanted to spy on a team, you would find a low-level person without a high profile exactly like that you would be able to spin a credible story to the public. Look, this guy has connections to Russians. And then you would use that. That's exactly. You're not going to go after Don Trump himself. He's so high profile, then it would be difficult to get that warrant and difficult to sell that to the American people. So you go after a low-level person, and that allows you to get in the back door to these communications to higher-level people. And they do this shit all the time, right? It's like with the Flynn calls. You can't spy on Flynn, but you can spy on Kislyak. So you can get Flynn's call, right? It's that type of thing. You can't go after Trump, but you get Carter Page.
But Kislyak is a legitimate target of FISA.
Well, I'm not saying that's not the case, right? But you see what I'm saying. You wouldn't, if you wanted to go after Flynn, you wouldn't just say, we're going to subpoena Flynn's records. You would say, oh, he was caught up in the legitimate surveillance we had. That's what they were doing with Carter Page. They're not going to directly say, we're going to go after Trump. They're going to say, we'll spin the story that we have a legitimate reason to go after a low-level person, and then we'll be able to, look at all these communications.
Just look inside is what you...
Well, look inside and try to find, and that's exactly, I don't know how you could dispute this. The entire investigation to Trump was show me the person, I'll show you the crime. That's why they're investigating things from 2013 and charging Manafort for, FARA violations in 2013 when he's working with Hillary Clinton's campaign manager group. That's what's going on. They're just trying to do anything, trying to get anyone, charge anyone with any crime that they've committed in the past 10 years, even if it has nothing to do with the 2016 election or Russia collusion, because they're hoping if we do that, we could try to get them to flip on Trump. That's why they're charging. By the way, that's why the Hillary investigation is so much of a double standard. They did the opposite. They're like, we'll give everyone immunity. Oh, now they don't want to flip. And so
I don't want to fall into the Clinton thing.
I
again,
know
but,
we don't have time to get it, but what I'm saying, so I'm just saying that like I will guarantee that like had none of this happened, and then going into the 2020 election, the exact inverse situation happened, that Trump paid a suspected spy of a foreign country, to come up with disinformation, accusing his opponent, Joe Biden, and people in Joe Biden's team of colluding with, China or Russia or whatever, right? And then his FBI, agents in the FBI that were high level that clearly in their private communications were expressing a bias for Trump and against Biden, all of a sudden have these unlawful FISA warrants that they're used to go after Biden's team. You would be gnashing your teeth, rightfully so. I would be right there with you. Like, this is fucking outrageous. This is a ridiculous abuse of power. And yet, that happened with Hillary's team. That happened with the DOJ under Obama. And no one gives a shit. It's just that, well, those people are gone. No big deal. It is absurd. Until accountability is brought for that, we can't look at then and say, basically what you'll say was, well, that was wrong, but we can't, because it was wrong, we can't apply that equal standard of, fine, then let's get unlawful FISA warrants against Biden. That would be wrong to do that as well. So then there is no equal standard.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, I do not think that you should get unlawful warrants on anybody.
Correct.
And so it is the case that, again, I'm assuming, and I'm taking it because I'm not an expert in FISA and I'm not the judge in front of it, but I'm just assuming that it's not going to meet the bar of probable cause if you were to include all that exculpatory evidence there. But so I'm assuming that because I think that's a reasonable take. So that's the only reason why I say it's unlawful, not because I think that there's some horrible motive behind it. But to be clear, I would not want that standard applied as to Trump. I don't want that applied to Trump in the future going forward, right? And I certainly don't agree with what occurred with the DOJ in the past.
That's true, but then,
on the FISA stuff.
I get that, and I understand that. I do. I don't. When I say equal standard, even I would stop short of that, though I'm getting to the point where I'm not. I think that it's becoming so corrupt that no one will learn, just like cancel culture. No one on the left's going to learn until they're victims of it. I sent for years, cancel culture's bad, it's stupid, it'll change, cooler heads will prevail. It won't. So now, unfortunately, we have Bud Light boycotts and shit like that, and that's just the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future. It's going to be the same with Lawfare. Unfortunately, because I can't convince people how terrible it is what's going on, we're likely to hopefully see AGs in places like Alabama start bringing charges against national-level politicians for obscure crimes that supposedly occurred while they were in Alabama. Okay. I guess that's where we'll have to go with this. So I know, but for the sake of this argument, I'll say, of course, I'm not saying I demand unlawful FISA warrants against Joe Biden. But what I am saying is that would be the equal treatment. And there seems to be then when you say, well, okay, there's smoke here, but I don't know that I would go so far enough to a panel, a grand jury to subpoena bank records. That wouldn't be unlawful. You're just saying they're having prosecutorial discretion that even though it could be lawful to subpoena those records, you wouldn't recommend
it. Would not be unlawful.
Correct. And so I don't think
it would be unlawful.
That is correct. And so what I'm saying to you is, given the abuses that we saw against Trump's team from the FBI, at the same time, for them to say, well, we have these high standards that we won't even use lawful tools that no one could argue would be unlawful, but we just don't feel like it because we feel it would be a bit too intrusive. I'm sorry, that doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah, so here's my take on the DOJ's take on the investigation into the Hunter Biden Burisma matter, which was that was part of the investigation of Bill Barr. I don't know if the subject of the investigation was Joe Biden, but the allegations to corruption as to Burisma relate to Joe Biden, right? So I don't think it's correct to say, well, just because it's an investigation into Hunter Biden, it couldn't criminally implicate Joe Biden. That's just kind of a side point. But
that's not what the whistleblower said. But go ahead.
The whistleblower said someone else said. Yeah, that's not what the whistleblower said. Someone else said.
What do you mean? The whistleblowers were told personally that they weren't allowed to investigate.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. My bad. Not the informant. I said that's what the informant said. The whistleblower said. What are you mentioning with the Irish whistleblowers? What did they say?
They were, correct me if I'm wrong, they said that they were specifically told that they weren't allowed to look into Joe Biden when it came to these financial transactions.
Irish is in the DOJ.
Well, that's true, but the only investigation we know that was looking at financial transactions was specifically told they weren't allowed to look into Joe Biden.
Well, the DOJ was looking at financial.
Were
financial,
they? Did they? We'll see. That's my question.
Yes, they are.
So the DOJ, you're saying, subpoenaed bank records of Joe Biden.
No, I'm not saying they. When was it even implied that I would say that the DOJ subpoenaed bank records?
Well, I guess it's implied. Maybe I'm looking into this wrong. When I'm saying the IRS tried to look into these bank records and they were told no, and you're like, well, that's because the DOJ is investigating. I assumed you meant, oh, that's because the DOJ looked into those records.
No. So the IRS. I'm not saying that the investigators, federal government investigators in general. I'm not saying that they looked into Joe Biden's bank records. I don't know that because we don't have access to things like the IG reports of these investigations, and so we don't know what investigatory steps the DOJ has taken, and also we don't have the investigation's ongoing, and so we're not going to learn those things while the investigation is ongoing, right? So I do not know the investigatory step, and you don't know.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
I assume there was no subpoena, right? I assume there was no subpoena because I assume I would have heard about a grand jury subpoena,
correct,
or it would have been leaked. So my reasonable guess is it's probably the case that they didn't grand jury subpoena the bank records. There are other ways to get access to bank records, by the way. I doubt the banks would have just handed them over, even though they're probably allowed to.
I only do that with January 6 people. That's when the only time they voluntarily hand shit over. Listen, I would have wrapped up by midnight.
You
so you can finish your point here, but then I did want to ask you something about Monday. But go ahead, finish your point.
Okay, sure, yeah. So I guess my final point on this issue is I didn't agree in retrospect with the FISA warrants as to Carter Page in the sense of how they went about doing it and whether or not they had probable cause at every step. That said, I would not apply that standard going forward, and there are other standards I would apply to grand jury subpoenas, and I wouldn't just agree with a federal grand jury subpoena of Trump's records unless there was a basis to conclude, a strong basis to think that there might be some criminal activity afoot. And I think that you would be genuinely pissed if, based on I don't know, the same quantity of evidence as to Trump, they were grand jury and subpoenaing, and I think you're mad about the tax records that were subpoenaed by the Manhattan prosecutors, right? So I think that we would apply a threshold, not just any threshold, to the use of federal criminal subpoenas, and we treat that differently than congressional subpoenas. And I guess that's my explanation for why I don't. I sort of view the impeachment inquiry stuff differently. And at this point, I'm just fine, get all the information. Subpoena all the people, fine, whatever you want to do. If you want to go down this path, let's do it. I don't really care, except to show people that it's a sham and that it's corrupt in the sense of they're doing it for bad motives, and that I think that it's a nothing murder.
We'll see. I think I've outlined the case why I don't think it's just one piece of evidence. There's a bunch of circumstantial evidence along with actual emails and stuff that we see that suggest that there's possibility of wrongdoing occurring that would warrant looking at. But nonetheless, I wanted to ask you about Monday. How do you want to do this debate?
Sure.
Do you want to give her a specific topic that we agree on and go from there? I don't know how long the debate's supposed to be.
Me neither.
What she's looking for to get out of it.
She messaged me and us, I'm guessing, separately.
Yeah. She basically just said to me, do you want to have would you be interested in a moderated debate between what you and Pisco have been talking about
on your Twitter war?
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's well, between conversations we've had and the Twitter, that's probably 20 hours worth of material. So do they want us to just come on like we normally would and be let's hyper focus on this one specific thing? Right? Is that going to be interesting to her audience to hear us go off about well, what about this interagency memo?
I was kind of thinking it while you're going over Destiny, because you were maybe 5 to 10% in the weeds, and everyone was like, "Holy shit, this is in the weeds."
And I'm
like, we you mentioned this letter to Shokin. But we spend hours on that letter. We spend hours on the other memos and the whatever. And so I don't know how. I think that's up to Erudite, honestly.
I agree. She should come up with something. If she doesn't, right? If she asks for our recommendation,
yeah.
I think that maybe the best thing to do would be to stick to Burisma. So, like, not talking about, meeting with Chinese business people or any shit like that. Right?
Yeah.
To stick to Burisma. I would like to make the case that I just make the opening statement that I think that my issue is there should have been an investigation and that there's a double standard in how Trump was treated. But I don't want to. I think that we could both agree we shouldn't get off onto FISA warrants and shit like that, other than just to briefly say, well, maybe there was a double standard is what I would say, but not to get really into it. And so then I think, I will outline my case, I guess, as the person in the affirmative. That, like, here's the brief facts we have that I think justified an investigation more than what we saw about wrongdoing in Burisma, and then you could provide your defense or not, and we could just go from there. I think that's maybe the best.
So
we'll definitely get in the weeds, but that's
tricky, right? Like, because when you say there's a justified investigation, if you're arguing it justifies an investigation, it sounds like I'd be arguing there shouldn't have been an investigation.
Well, I said justifies more of investigation that we're aware of. So you could argue, well, there was an investigation and that investigation was sufficient. I think that's grounds for you to argue.
I think based on this, on the FD 2023, based on like allegations that Trump is making, I don't have a problem with the DOJ opening an investigation into the Burisma matter. And I think they did that. So I don't have a problem with the DOJ.
Well, you think they already did?
That. Yeah, I think that they did.
When just curious, when do you think they did that?
I think that they did it under the Trump administration.
You think the DOJ under Bill Barr? Okay, so I'm aware. Like, I don't want to spoil the debate. Certainly, you could talk.
Yeah.
But I'll just tell you my argument to that's going to be like it was clearly insufficient. They didn't interview Joe Biden. They didn't interview Shokin. They didn't interview Poroshenko. They didn't interview Onyshenko. They didn't subpoena bank records. Right, that's gonna, just so you know, that's going to be my argument.
They did interview Onyshenko.
No. They didn't interview Onyshenko, did they? They briefly talked to him and then said they were going to bring him in to talk to people in the DOJ, and then at the last minute said, never mind, we can't bring you in. So they had this cursory conversation with him and then decided they weren't going to bring him to the United States.
I think that they talked to him in 2016 and they're like, we don't trust this motherfucker and we're going to have no more relationship with him. I think they said we're not going to have any relationship with him publicly because they didn't credit him. That's my understanding.
Okay. But obviously that's for the debate. Obviously we could talk.
Sure.
I mean, it becomes difficult because understand my position has never been 100% proof that Joe Biden is guilty. My position has been not focusing on Biden or Trump or Hillary. It's focusing on the process and the double standard of the process. And what I see is that there is a blatant double standard in how they treated an investigation into Joe Biden.
Well, then that's problematic, Rob, because then the question will be like, it'll be like a Hillary Clinton conversation where we're sort of parsing out all the investigatory steps taken and where you and I have a different take on like the immunity given and whether or not they searched all the devices and all that stuff, right? And whether or not that's the kind of discussion then that, because like I don't disagree with an investigation into the matter. We just think that the investigations were treated differently, but we don't have the roadmap of the Weiss investigation.
Well, this is the problem then, right? So because we could avoid that theoretically, and I could be like, let me outline my case of circumstantial evidence, right, as to why I think this suggests that corruption could have happened, and you'll be able to say, but for all we know, this was already investigated by the DOJ, and they came to the conclusion that there was no wrongdoing here. So normally when we could both agree with this. If we see something and we have circumstantial evidence that leads us to believe something. If there is an investigation that supersedes that, has more specific information that says actually circumstantial evidence didn't point to the direction that you thought, right? So what'll be difficult is you're going to say, well, for all we know that the DOJ technically looked at this and we know that they didn't charge anyone with crimes. Therefore, they must have looked into all the facts. Okay.
I wouldn't say that. But the problem is it would be easy for you to establish I think sufficient evidence for an initial DOJ investigation. I think that would be fine for you to establish.
What if I could? What if the argument is, could I establish that investigation should have happened in 2016?
Okay, that's going to be tough.
Because that's my argument. I think
then you have to have produce evidence of what DOJ knew at the time, right? Like one of the major components of or this debates over the Durham report, IG report, and Crossfire Hurricane is what did the DOJ know when, right? Did they know at this time X? How did the investigation started? What was the basis of it? And so we don't, when was it even considered? Whether one of the basis, for example, for you to deter, one of the strongest things that you will always say, right, is they fired this prosecutor, and then later he gave him a slap on the wrist, right? That's what you'll say.
Correct.
And so if that is the basis, one of the articulable basis for investigations, then that occurs, whenever the slap in the wrist happens.
Okay, right? 2016. And in 2016.
I think it's 10 months after Lutsenko takes over.
No, I don't
so I think that's 10 months from.
So. I think it was December 2016 is when it was closed. So he came in May. So that's what, 7 months? Biden gave a speech in Ukraine like 3 days after Lutsenko announced the settling of the investigation. So you could theoretically argue, well, that's Trump's FBI, that's Trump's DOJ. Why didn't they investigate in 2017? Why didn't they investigate right at the beginning of 2017? I will argue, yeah, they should have. Do you think at that point? I mean, maybe you agree with me. Do you agree that there should have been a DOJ investigation once that occurred in late 2016?
I think once you have the FD 23, the 1023, where there's an explicit allegation of a bribe, right? Mm-hmm. I think that once that occurs, the DOJ should probably take a look at it, right? DOJ should take a look.
So if that was 2017 and they didn't, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that if they had not taken a look, and remember, take a look here. I'm just using that term loosely. I don't know what other information is available to FBI or DOJ at the time, but if they took in that information and didn't follow up in any capacity on Hunter Biden related stuff or Burisma related stuff, or talk to the relevant people, that would be, I think, problematic, right?
All right, let's just say this because I do have to get going. Let's just say this. Okay. I say fuck it. We can each quibble when we get there about this is what we thought the debate should be. But I think the safest thing, unless Erudite steers us in a direction, is just I'm going to outline the case. Forget about legality. Forget about all that shit. I'm going to outline the case I have that suggests possible corruption by Biden, and you're going to give the defense. And it'll be a conversation for another day about whether or not what was a threshold meant for DOJ investigation and this and that. I will tell you in my opening statement, I'm going to say that my real concern is the FBI and a double standard. Yeah, but for the purposes of this debate, we are just going to try to focus on what the case is. If you
I just think that the case, the quote, there should have been an investigation. I think the problem that you're identifying is like a time lag between when it started or the specific tools used or whether or not you think it was sufficient investigation. And I think, I don't know, the focus of the investigation.
But do you understand that it's interesting to hear this because I think that's going to be a lot of the dispute that we always have then, right? Because you're like, well, these are unanswerable questions. And I'm looking at the behavior of the FBI and their bias and the actions they took and that I thought were terrible with Trump. And then I'm lining it up. And it's this constant thing where it's like you're looking at these things in a vacuum and you're saying like, well, in a normal process, is it possible that this sort of investigative technique could have occurred? Theoretically, it's within the legal bounds. So, and so it's like, it's not looking at it as like, okay, we set this new precedent with Trump. And so now, I think that there's...
Well, the precedent, I think that your assumption that we set a precedent for with respect to the FISA stuff, we tried to set a precedent against that, right? That's the whole point of it.
But it's not just that. That's certainly the biggest part of it. But if you read the Durham report, he says that a preliminary investigation based on the Papadopoulos stuff should have been warranted, but the tools that were used thereafter weren't. And he's not just talking about FISA. Confidential human sources like Stephen Halper going to Papadopoulos, like all of these steps. Like I don't think
it's really credible on this, by the way. But
Oh, I completely disagree. But like the idea that it's like, well, Russia there's a claim that Russia did something. Should someone at the FBI look into it? Of course, right? That's different than having the target of your investigation be members of a political campaign. To me, that's different. So looking at Russia doing... You don't think?
No, I think it's also different what techniques are used and why and when and what the basis is for them. So you would probably agree, yeah, okay, maybe if Papadopoulos says that you have an open investigation into Russia, but you don't necessarily grand jury all of Trump's bank records on that basis. Or let's say you don't get all of Trump's servers just because there may have been, because you think there might be an email there. And so, like, I think that and you know, they didn't do that in the Russia investigation. They took a FISA warrant, but we don't agree with the process they took that. And I don't think that should be the precedent. I think what we've learned from the Crossfire Hurricane, one of the strongest lessons has been that the FISA process needs a real second look.
I disagree. I think what we learned is there's a culture at the FBI that feels that they're above the law and they could use their institution to go after people that they dislike. But that's a conversation for another day. I do have to get going, so I will. You say what you want to Erudite in our group chat, and I'll chime in if I think's necessary. Sure. I don't know if she'll hear this, but I don't know if she knows what she's getting into, I guess is the short version of what I'm saying. So, but I don't mind. Like, I'm more than happy to have someone moderate, and I think Erudite will be a fine moderator. I don't have a problem with that. So, you know, if she says, well, I'm interested in this, can we go in this direction, like in the middle of the debate, I'm fine with that. I am. I just don't know what she intends, because it was an unusual request. Most of the time someone will reach out to you and be like, do you want to debate January 6 indictments? And you're like, sure. It's not often that people are like, oh, I saw you were arguing with someone on Twitter. Do you want to talk about it? It's like, well, we've been arguing on Twitter for like 8 months. So what exactly are you talking about? So, but all right. Well, I appreciate calling. Yep. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Later.
Yep. So for my audience, so that I got to talk to my wife. Honestly, I was supposed to stream tomorrow evening, which I'm committed to that, and I'm going to stick to that. But I'll see if my wife allows me, when looking at my schedule, if I have to. Not allows me. That's a terrible way to look at it. If I'm free. Yeah, Medieval Mike. That's what it sounds like to me. You know, that I think that I'm forced to argue necessarily things that aren't the thrust of what my argument is, because my argument is that double standard. But regardless, anyways, so maybe I'll hop on and talk with Destiny sometime between noon and sometime before 8 p.m. Maybe I'll do it on the phone and won't stream it, so maybe you'll have to catch that on Destiny stream. I don't know, but I do have to get downstairs. I really, 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 really do. I hate fucking streaming Wednesdays so much. I hate. However, I've been razzing Destiny for a long time because he won't debate me one-on-one. I hardly think what this was today was a debate. So I don't think that qualifies. But all credit to him. He did proffer an offer to me to come on. And so I didn't want to miss that opportunity. The reason I hate to stream on Wednesdays is because I've been gone since Saturday. I've not seen my wife and son since Saturday. And I like to spend time with them. So it kind of sucks. Though I do think Hank was going down to sleep right as I was coming up. So my family time is the most important thing. We will see. But I really, really hope I have the opportunity to have an hour or two to talk to Destiny tomorrow. And hopefully he'll be ready to argue instead of just ask me to outline facts. And we can have a debate. And we could yell at each other or whatever. That would be fun. That's what I want to do. We're on YouTube. I'm sure you could raid people on YouTube, but I don't know how to do it. So I'm just going to let you all go. I appreciate all of you. I know this wasn't something that was scheduled. I know it's not on Twitch. My normal biggest audience is on Twitch. Thank you to all of you on YouTube, Kick, Twitter, and Rumble that have watched me this evening. If I stream tomorrow, it also won't be on Twitch because... or at least that early stream, because Destiny's banned on Twitch, so I can't stream with them there. So thank you all so much. I hope you all have a good evening. At least I'll be on at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening, but you might want to check me out around noon or something like that to see if I'm popping on with Destiny. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. And as always, wait, I already said have a good one. Fuck, I screwed up my punchline. Well, have a good one. We'll see y'all.